Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Green Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 914 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And Belarus is getting a little bit froggy, and they might just jump. That'd be a bad move, but they might do it. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, as we have gotten some very serious and majorly concerning news coming from the Ukrainian government today that satellite footage and intelligence information has started to show that the Belarusians are conducting a massive military buildup along the northern Ukrainian border. This force is supposedly multiple brigades spanning within the tens of thousands of soldiers, making up the large majority of Belarus's armed forces, and it appears that this is such a serious incident that the Ukrainians are attempting to sound the alarm and are also demanding, in fact they are dictating, that the Belarusians must withdraw their forces from the border very soon, otherwise there may be other actions to follow. It does appear that at this moment there may be a large invasion force built by the Belarusians on the southern border of Belarus, waiting to invade Ukraine at any given moment. And there is good reason that that may be happening. The Russians are practically at a breaking point inside of the Kursk Oblast, and from what we understand, Russian forces are continuing to take high losses in this area. They are losing ground still, and it seems as though there has been really no actions or efforts that have been able to stymie or slow the Ukrainian offensive in this direction. The Russians attempted to make a propaganda claim today that we were never able to validify previously, once again showing that they are clutching at straws at this moment within this area to try and make it seem as though things are going well, when in fact it's the complete contrary. Things are going very poorly. Not only that, we have also been able to hear from inside the area of Proletarsky the fire continues to burn, and there is no chance of stopping this fire at this point, as it has now spread into the town itself, and it appears that the town is also being consumed by the blaze as well, making sure that the Russians will not only lose the Proletarsky oil depot, but may also lose the town of Proletarsky, or a large part of it, as well. At the exact same time, Ukrainian offensive action has been continuing in the Kharkiv Oblast, and a decent amount of footage has come out from the Ukrainian 3rd Brigade today, showing the kind of offensive actions that have been undertaken and the kind of attacks that have been inflicted upon the Russians, limiting their numbers and also starting to push them back little by little within this area. At the exact same time, we have also been able to hear that the Russians' progress around the area of Pokrovsk, from what we can tell, has been slowed. While they have been moving little by little each and every day, it appears that they are moving at a very minuscule amount at this point, or may have been completely stopped dead in their tracks somewhere around the town of Rodivka, at least at the moment. We have also been able to see the Ukrainian forces have continued to conduct airstrikes on Russians around the area of Novokakhovka, and we also got to see some Su-24s firing off Scalp EEGs for a deep strike mission inside of Russian-occupied territory, although we don't have exact details on that at this moment. But we have an absolutely massive amount of news tonight. It is actually loads and loads and loads of news, and these are just some of the big stories that have been coming out tonight so far. But before we get into that, I do want to mention that we are running a Sunday night fundraiser for Revive Soldiers of Ukraine, which has done amazing work through the course of the war, saving Ukrainian soldiers' lives and helping them out with dealing with their afflictions and sometimes serious wounds, such as the loss of limbs and sometimes even gunshots to the head, that have all been helped out by Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. It's an amazing nonprofit, and I highly recommend that folks support them, because every bit of support that y'all give this nonprofit actually makes a difference for the Ukrainian soldiers' lives that we're talking about and covering in this news tonight. But moving on from that and into our major news around the area of the northern Ukrainian border near to Belarus, we have been able to hear that apparently there is a massive buildup of Belarusian forces that are happening in this area. We can actually see the direct statement right here put out on Live UA Map, which is also directly connected to the Ukrainian government. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. According to intelligence, the armed forces of Belarus, under the guise of military exercises, are concentrating personnel, equipment, tanks, artillery, anti-aircraft missiles, and air defense systems in the Homel region near the northern border of Ukraine. Mercenaries of the former Wagner PMC were deployed as well. Conducting exercises near the border and the Chernobyl nuclear power plant pose a threat to the national security of Ukraine and world security in general. We call on the officials of Belarus not to make tragic mistakes for their own country under pressure from Moscow, and to withdraw the troops from the state border of Ukraine to a distance that exceeds the range of damage of the systems available in the Republic of Belarus. We warn that in the event of a violation of the border, Ukraine will use all necessary measures for self-defense, and all troop rallies, facilities, and supply routes in Belarus will become legitimate targets for the armed forces of Ukraine. A very strong...
it's really weird because that sounds almost exactly like what happened when Russia did their quote-unquote military exercises near the border of Ukraine, and then they invaded the place. So it sounds very, very reminiscent of that, which is concerning.
It really does sound exactly reminiscent, and a lot of people have been trying to downplay this today. Some people have been trying to downplay this significantly and go, "Oh, it's just a war games exercise. They aren't going to be invading." The Russians used the exact same excuse for a while that they were conducting military exercises and war games around the border to disguise their buildup of troops as something that was a lot more benign and harmless than the actual offensive preparations that they were making under the surface. It appears that according to Ukrainian intelligence, the Belarusians are doing the exact same thing at this moment around the area of Gomel and apparently around the area of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So really, from what we can tell, it seems as though the Belarusian forces have been spread out in between Gomel and all the way down here to Chernobyl, meaning that the Belarusians would attempt to advance on Chernihiv and Kyiv simultaneously, much like the Russian offensive at the beginning of 2022 attempted yet failed to actually achieve any kind of real progress on. We also got to see another statement that was made by the Ukrainian government as well today. This was posted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, this specific tweet right here, and it says, Ukraine calls on the armed forces of Belarus to withdraw troops from the border of Ukraine to a distance that exceeds the range of fire systems available in Belarus. And that was a direct statement from Dmytro Kulba's office, who is the foreign minister of Ukraine. This is once again showing that on the official governmental level, as well as on the official statement level, we have enough evidence to know and clearly assume at this point that the information and intelligence Ukraine is gathering is true. They are beginning to act off of the intelligence that they have gathered, and it is certainly starting to show that the Belarusians have a very large armed force that has been built up within the Gomel region of Belarus, spanning most likely from the city of Gomel and south on the E95 and all the way out and into the area around the P35 at Chernobyl, and maybe even as far out as the P37, near to the area of Diatlik. But nevertheless, we are trying to get as much information as we possibly can beyond the official governmental statements that have been issued by the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, and also the official statement that was also published as well, which was a direct written account of the statement of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kulba. We do not have exact video and picture evidence at the moment to be able to show these armed forces buildups. We only have the official government statements from Ukraine to work off of, but we are going to be working off of those at the moment because by our own criteria of factual news reporting here on this channel, we either accept video and picture evidence as paramount forms of proof for the kind of news that we're covering, or we will take official government statements from governmental officials as truthful statements as well. And at the moment, we are seeing that this statement has been made not once but twice today by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is confirming that the situation is actually happening. Now, if there was a high possibility that the Belarusians would invade Ukraine at any point, there may be a good reason to believe that this would be right now. With the Ukrainian invasion happening inside of Kursk, we do understand that the Ukrainians have diverted a large amount of their free and available manpower inside of the Kursk Oblast and are currently conducting an offensive there that is starting to really give the Russians a severe bloody nose. The Russians have pretty much already lost an entire brigade south of the Reka Sim, which is trapped in that area at this moment. They've also been able to lose larger border settlements like Sudza and half of Korenivo at this moment, and the Ukrainian forces appear to be continuing their advance deeper into Russia with each passing day, and while it's not at the lightning fast pace it was within the first few days of the offensive, it certainly still is making progress, and it's something that the Russians have not really been able to put down, even with us now having information that the Russians actually have enough forces in the area that they are 1-to-1 in ratio with the Ukrainian attacking forces that are in this area, meaning that at least on most military scales, the Ukrainians should not be able to make any advances at all at this moment, and neither should the Russians, but nevertheless the Ukrainians are, and they are continuing to push further and further in to the area around Kursk. This is giving us a reason to believe that the Belarusians may be attempting to come to Russia's aid and start to invade the northern area of Ukraine, so that way Ukraine has to most likely withdraw forces from the active front line near Pokrovsk and also from inside of Kursk and Vovchansk to be able to draw them back and into the northern area around Kyiv and to defend the capital city of Ukraine. But nevertheless, this is one of the most strenuous and stressful circumstances that we've seen at the moment, and once again, with official statements coming out, we have to confirm this to be absolutely true, and the Ukrainian government believes that an invasion may be imminent at this point from the Republic of Belarus. And a lot of people have been wondering about this military exercise that the Belarusians have launched within their southern region around Gomel. Is this a serious attempt at an invasion of Ukraine? Are the Belarusians actually going to join the war at this point? Or is this nothing more than posturing and threatening from the Belarusians and trying to draw Ukraine's forces away from such vital offensives like the one in Kursk, or such vital defenses like the one at Pokrovsk, so that way the Russians can continue to try and have a little bit of an upper hand, at least on the strategic level of the actual war, and continue to try and fight and win the battles that they've been posed with at this moment? Or is it something else completely different than that? Maybe the Belarusians will never invade Ukraine at all, and these really are just military exercises. But still, a lot of people have been throwing in many different opinions on this. This is one of the biggest questions that we've had to ask in recent news history here on this channel. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this Belarusian military exercise, and what are you thinking about it? Do you think it's nothing at all? Do you think that they're only posturing, or do you think that this is actually leading to a full-scale invasion of northern Ukraine from Belarus?
So it looks like about 40% of the audience said Belarus will invade Ukraine on Russia's behalf, while 39% said Belarus is only posturing and threatening Ukraine, and 11% said Belarus will never invade Ukrainian territory. And on this one right here, I must say that it looks very concerning to me because, once again, like I mentioned, this is looking very reminiscent of the quote-unquote military exercises that Russia said they were conducting right before they went in and invaded Ukraine on a full-scale invasion. Of course, we have been waiting to see what Putin is going to do in response to the invasion of Kursk, which right now Russia really hasn't retaliated very much to that attack into Russian territory, and this could be the big hoopla that Putin has been talking about to get even with Ukraine. So that is a possibility. And also the fact that Wagner troops are in there with the Belarusian forces, that's also another very concerning sign as well, indicating that this could be an actual invasion preparation by the Belarusians to invade into Ukraine. So the concerning part is Kyiv is very close to the border with Belarus, which is obviously a pretty big threat. So right now it's looking pretty tense and serious, and I'm actually with the 39% that believe that Belarus will invade Ukraine on Russia's behalf. I'm not sure when it's actually going to happen, but it's looking more likely than not. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would also have to agree. This seems more so of an attempt at a preparation for a military invasion than anything that we've seen so far. The Belarusians have been fairly careful throughout most of the war to not have their own armed forces on the border. And the only times there's been a heavy military presence along the northern Ukrainian border, it's been almost entirely Russian armed forces at every given moment. During the initial invasion in 2022, when Russian forces began to march across the border towards the city of Kyiv and also towards Chernihiv as well, and then to the moments afterwards where we saw that there was a heavy Russian contingent that was still sitting in this area and attempting to make the Ukrainians believe that there would be a second offensive created in this area at some point in the future. Those are the only two times that we have seen a major military buildup within this area. And the most important thing to get from both of those military buildups is that neither one was conducted by the Belarusian armed forces. They were conducted by the Russian armed forces. This is starting to show us that the Belarusians are actually possibly preparing for some sort of an offensive action into Ukraine. And if they consider themselves to be allies of the Russian Federation, which by technical definition they are, as they are a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, Russia's version of NATO, they probably would start to prepare for an offensive at this point, because from what we understand, the Kursk offensive is still not going well for the Russians. The Russians are still getting pushed back. They are taking very high losses. We understand that the Russians really can't find any viable numbers of manpower that will be able to last the frontline fighting in this area. We've seen that Putin went to Kadyrov to talk about getting a load of conscripts from Chechnya, trying to circumvent Putin's promise that he made to the Russian people that he would never use conscripts in full scale in the war. Although that's been untrue, it still hasn't been on an industrial scale. We have seen that the Russians seem to be in a very bad situation now that the Kursk offensive is in full swing, and there doesn't really seem to be any stopping this. The Belarusians may be trying to step in at this point, because if the Belarusians open up a new front into northern Ukraine, this starts to change the game for Ukraine a lot. Ukraine probably would actually start to seriously be on the back foot at this point, because they would be stretched a little too thin. They would have to make the option of withdrawing Ukrainian forces from Kursk and pretty much giving up on this offensive right when it began, or withdrawing forces from Vovchansk and possibly putting this area into a very dangerous or jeopardized situation. They may have to withdraw forces from Chasiv Yar or from the area of Pokrovsk, once again jeopardizing the defensives within these areas, and they may also even have to withdraw forces from other areas, maybe even trying to have to raise more conscripts rapidly to try and defend this northern area around Kyiv and Chernihiv. This would be a situation that actually would be pretty difficult for Ukraine, and this may be the reason why the Belarusians are now preparing for an invasion, because they may be seeing that there is a chance to possibly throw Ukraine off kilter, at least compared to how on kilter what would be
On point, I guess you could say.
on point would be a good way to say it. How on point the Ukrainians have been with fighting the war so far over the 914 days it's been going on. So going off of this, I would have to say it does appear to largely be some sort of a preparation for an invasion, and most likely will begin soon, unless if there's some sort of a heavy international involvement stopping them from trying to take this action, such as, for example, some sort of a threat of armed intervention by Poland or by France, which have made statements in the past making it seem like it would be highly likely that the Polish or the French would come to the Ukrainians' aid if such a thing was to happen at that point. But still, it is a...
Also, Enforcer, I got a question for you as well. As I asked the other day, I said, where are the Wagner troops? Because Russia was trying to recall them from around the world, all the Wagner forces, the mercenary group, to come back and fight in Kursk to try to help repel the Ukrainians' invasion. But right now, we really haven't seen them show up in mass in the Kursk region. So do we know how many Wagner troops are actually involved in Belarus's military exercises? That could explain where they've gone.
We don't really know how many, and the number has fluctuated heavily back when we were actually getting consistent counts out of the area. It has been anywhere in between 1,000 to 10,000 Wagner forces inside of Belarus at any point. We don't know what that number actually looks like nowadays, so we have this insanely massive window that we're working with where it could be anywhere in between 1,000 guys, which is about a battalion, or 10,000 guys, which would be about 3 brigades worth of Wagner forces inside of Belarus. So at the moment, we don't really have a good picture on that.
Do you think that maybe Russia might have redirected the Wagner forces over to Belarus to maybe actually strengthen up the forces to invade into Ukraine? Because to me, that sounds like that could make logical sense. Obviously, we're somewhat speculating on that because we don't have the evidence for it. But the fact that we haven't seen Wagner inside of Russia in mass numbers indicates to me that either they're very slow in being recalled from around the world and they're just really dragging their feet on coming back, or they're maybe in Belarus hiding out and that's where they're suddenly at.
Maybe so. It may be that that's possibly the case, that they diverted them into Belarus, maybe to try and fortify or strengthen the Belarusian army, considering that it has incredibly low morale from what we understand, or at least according to public reports that we've been able to get. Or it may be used as some sort of a modern-day version of the Varangian Guard, considering that this group is Russian, not Belarusian. They would have more loyalty to the central leader, which would be Lukashenko, than any other force in the Belarusian army, meaning that these people would be a lot more cutthroat in dealing with other elements of the Belarusian armed forces that may attempt to rise up against Lukashenko if he's actually preparing some sort of an offensive like we're talking about right now. So that may be possible that they did move them into Belarus in larger numbers, because like Matthew is saying, and he has a really good point, we've never really seen the Wagner forces that were supposed to be recalled from Africa into Kursk to defend the Kursk region. We have never seen any documented evidence of them ever arriving in Kursk or engaging in any fighting against the Ukrainian forces there. And so for that reason, we think that they may be elsewhere. They may have never even returned, or they may now be in Belarus at this point and helping to fortify or at least enrich the Belarusian army to ensure that it doesn't break as quickly as it would otherwise, considering that the Belarusian armed forces is an entirely conscript force. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Still a very interesting point. And it seems as though a lot of people are really kind of on the fence now. I'm actually seeing that a lot of people are actually starting to say, just a little bit more of them, that the Belarusians are only posturing and threatening. And maybe that is the case, but we've never seen a posturing or a threatening like this before from the Belarusian side. This seems to be something entirely new, and this is leading us to take this a lot more seriously and as a more dangerous situation than others we've seen in the past. Everyone does have to remember that we usually work off of on this channel a historical precedent, either laid out in times long since past of hundreds of years, if not thousands of years of history, of repeated instances coming to the same conclusion time and time again, or we use historical precedents that have been laid out by the war of Ukraine itself. And usually those are pretty good precedents to work off of. We do not have a precedent at this moment to show the Belarusians moving a large number of their armed forces into this area of the border and doing nothing. They have never moved their forces in such large numbers to the border area before. And so going off of that, we don't really have a modicum of knowledge to work off of here to say that this is not a big deal. Considering that this is the first time something like this has happened, it's usually logical to assume the worst, and then if anything less happens, then we're in pretty good shape at that point. That's kind of the approach that Ukraine is taking to it as well, once again to remind everyone of the official Ukrainian governmental statement, at least in paraphrase form, that was put out today by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Ukraine calls on the armed forces of Belarus to withdraw troops from the border of Ukraine to a distance that exceeds the range of fire systems available in Belarus. This is once again showing that the Ukrainians are also, once again, looking at this, having no precedent for this ever happening in the war before, and they are now treating this as a very serious situation, as they are expecting the worst as well, and that this may actually be a preparation for an armed offensive into northern Ukraine, which would really start to throw the Ukrainians off in the entire war effort. And at this point in the war, considering how stretched the Ukrainians and Russians are, and how stretched the Ukrainians have gotten for strategic reserves since the start of the Kursk offensive, this could actually be the single occasion that would put the Ukrainians on the back foot and probably would be very hard to recover from, at least from a Ukrainian perspective. So going off of that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least with the situation we're seeing in this border region at the moment, because we are going to be continuing to eye this closely and try and see if anything does start to develop out of this any more or any less. We would love to be able to come back to y'all in a couple of days on Tuesday when we run this next stream, or maybe even tomorrow when we make our short war summary, and tell y'all everything is a-okay, nothing happened in this area, and the Belarusians really did run a military exercise. I would hope that that would be what we can say. But there is also a high likelihood that we could be saying that the Belarusian forces have now crossed the border, and the Ukrainians are having to rapidly divert other forces, maybe even reserve forces, into this area to try and plug the gap until they can figure out something that would be a more long-term fix to this new offensive in this new nation that would have joined the war. But with that,
I gotta admit, like, this whole situation really has me worried because, like you kind of mentioned earlier, Ukraine is extended pretty deep right now with the invasion into Russia, and that was something that nobody expected. We had heard in the background that they were having manpower issues inside of Ukraine, and they were having issues even staffing the front line of the border, and also the front line of Ukraine fighting the Russians. So, to me, this is very, very, very bad because, like the enforcer said, they would have to retract all those troops out of Russia to come back and try to shore up the front line, and then they would actually have to go defend Kyiv. I'm not sure what type of defense forces Kyiv actually has in place right this moment, but surely they're going to need more reinforcements if Wagner, Belarus, and all these other countries decide to jump in and invade, so that wouldn't be good whatsoever. But the only question to me is, what would be the biggest thing that would happen consequence-wise to Belarus if they did this? Because what could the West really do to prevent it is my real question.
I don't really know of a lot we could do to prevent it. We could threaten direct military action against Belarus, but considering that they do have nuclear weapons, we're kind of limited in what we can do in response to them without fearing that other allies within the region could end up getting nuked by the Belarusians if things went really badly for them. So there really isn't much we can do. Like, really, there's not a lot of point in rabbit holing about what we could do, because once again, like we saw earlier, Belarus actually does have possession of the nuclear weapons that are housed in Belarus currently. They're not being operated by the Russians there. Lukashenko made it very clear recently that if Ukrainian forces cross the border into Belarus, they were going to nuke them. Like, not the Russians were going to nuke them, the Belarusians were going to nuke them with the nuclear weapons that Russia gave to Belarus. So we do understand that the Belarusians are nuclear armed at this point. We don't know how large the weapons are and how big their range is, but they are armed. And for that reason, we can't really do that much to them Otherwise, we could end up getting the Baltic states, Poland, or any other nation nearby getting hit with a nuclear weapon, which would be a very bad situation to work off of diplomatically, and that would be the most extreme things have ever gotten in the modern world. So we don't really know what could be done. Of course, the Polish and the French have actually threatened military intervention before on a scenario like this, specifically the French. I'm not sure if the French would be that apt to get involved at this point. We've seen that the French have kind of backed off of these strongman statements. We don't know if they still stand by those statements, but we have seen that they've started to make them a lot less, which is leading us to believe that maybe they're not that gung-ho in that position anymore. We're not entirely sure on that, though, and we'd have to wait and see what a French response really would look like. And also, the Polish seem to be heavily limited by the United States, or at least the United States' actions within the area, because Poland is currently involved in one of the largest arms acquisitions projects in history, in modern history at least, and a lot of those weapon systems are coming from the United States. And for that reason, they don't really want to piss off America too much, because America could start, in retaliation, to cancel a large amount of those orders that the Polish have made, and then the Polish are not able to arm and really militarize their nation like they deem fit at the moment. So
yeah, that's a huge risk to me. The U.S. could start trying to punish Poland for that. But just to be clear, though, to my understanding, Poland could act independently of NATO, because Poland is obviously a NATO member. They could act independent and decide to take action against Belarus, and technically there's nothing wrong with that. And then all of a sudden, if Poland was attacked directly, I guess that would not mean, while I grab a bot real quick, that would not mean that Article 5 would be activated, because at that point, Poland's a voluntary participant in the conflict. So I don't think Article 5 would apply in that situation, but they could. But I think, kind of like the enforcer is saying, I think the USA would pressure them out of it. And, you know, really, honestly, I don't think Belarus would nuke anybody, if I'm being perfectly honest here. They do have nukes in their possession, but I don't think they would go that far, because Belarus is kind of in the same position that Russia's in, and they don't want all that hell coming down their heads. They don't want that. So, I don't know. I see that it's pretty popular in the live chat. A lot of people are saying that Poland will jump in. I just really don't think that's likely. I think it's possible, but not very likely.
I would have to say, also, I'm seeing some people refuting the statement that Belarus has nuclear weapons. Trust me on that, because we do this every single day. I don't mean to pull out the Trump card here, but we do this every single day as a full-time job. We pay attention to every single thing that happens that we can actually confirm with video or picture evidence or official government statements. There have been official government statements made by the Belarusians that have confirmed that they have the access to the nuclear weapons that are currently stored inside of Belarus. We've been following this story for about a year, since the arrival of the Russian nuclear forces into Belarus, and then the possible U.S. response of moving nuclear weapons from Germany and into Poland, which was considered for a while in direct response to the nuclear weapons being moved into Belarus. Then it went quiet for a while, and then the next time we started to hear statements about the Russian nuclear weapons in Belarus, the Russian nuclear forces had completely disappeared from the picture, and the Belarusians were then presenting the story that they were in possession of the nuclear weapons and were able to use them. This is something that you do not say as a country for funsies or funsy onesies. Having a nuclear weapon is a very dangerous thing, and a lot of countries are going to start acting around you completely different when they have a nuclear weapon. So this statement is a very calculated one and is most likely backed up with actual force, such as some sort of a nuclear weapon. So going off of that, we do understand that the Belarusians do have some nuclear weapons within their possession, most likely tactical nuclear weapons of a smaller kiloton yield, but nevertheless highly dangerous for any forces that would be trying to get involved from the West against Belarus in the defense of Ukraine. And of course, considering that Lukashenko's government seems to be a lot more fragile than the Russian government, we would assume that the use of such a nuclear weapon, either on the Belarusians themselves or anyone outside of Belarus, would be a lot higher of a chance than we would see with the Russian Federation, which government is a lot more secure, at least within its governmental apparatus. But nevertheless, a lot of people are talking about, if Belarus invades Ukraine with Wagner forces, would Kyiv be in serious danger as a priority target? Because right now, from what we hear, these forces are somewhere in between the Gomel and Chernobyl area, meaning that they would be on really a corridor heading straight down to Kyiv, either from Chernihiv or straight to Kyiv through the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And a lot of people are throwing in different opinions and statements on this right now, and a lot of people seem to be believing that Kyiv would actually be in a pretty large amount of danger, maybe even a very unstable situation at that. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about? Do you think that they're in great danger, or not so much?
So it looks like 48% of the audience said Kyiv would be in extreme danger as the capital city. It would be a priority target, and the Wagner and Belarusian forces would go for it. And at 23% said Kyiv would never be at a major risk during a Belarusian invasion. And at 20% said, I need more intel on this. And I would have to say that if Belarus made the very extreme decision to invade Ukraine, which would be absolutely wild in my opinion, because the invasion would not serve Belarus's national interest whatsoever, it would be purely a play at Putin's behest, and that's the only reason they would do it. It would be very extreme for Belarus to actually pull that off. I would say that they would be going for the throat. They would be going for Kyiv, and that would be their objective, is to take the capital city immediately and hope that there's not enough forces to protect it. Right now, I really don't know if there are enough forces to protect Kyiv in its entirety, depending on how large the Belarusian forces really have amassed at the border, but the city would be in extreme danger. I have no doubt about that, and that would be where the most of the fighting would be happening. And considering the forces are amassed right there above Kyiv, that is a logical assumption. So it would be in danger, and I think it is a priority target. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that at the moment, from what we understand about the situation, and I'm going to tell y'all a little bit here so that way y'all can get an idea of why this is a little bit concerning to me. There is a way that I've generally been able to look at how many Ukrainian forces are where and of what type, and there are only about 3 brigades that are currently holding the entire area in between Chernihiv and Chernobyl. About 3 of them. And they're not at all high quality brigades either. One of them is a territorial defense brigade. Another one is the part of the Ukrainian National Brigade. Once again, well, National Guard, not Brigade, but once again, another territorial defense brigade. And then inside of the city of Kyiv, there is a fairly small number of light infantry. They're still territorial defense brigades, largely made up of what would be called the Ukrainian National Guard. Not a lot there. And also on top of that, from what we know, there is only 1 anti-aircraft missile brigade that is currently protecting Kyiv, along with a public protection brigade, which is also inside of Kyiv as well. So pretty much this entire area north of Kyiv is held down by about 2 to 3 brigades, all of them being territorial defense forces, mostly within the reserve. And inside of Kyiv itself, there is maybe an additional 2 combat brigades of territorial defense forces and about another air defense brigade, and then a public security brigade. That is about as rear line as you can get. That's pretty much armed police at that point, and not incredibly well armed like the national police that we've seen fighting in the area around Vovchansk. So going off of that, this situation is not that good. And some people have said, wow, how do you know that? There's people who compile information out there about what's where and who's what. I'm not going to say what specific brigades there are, but we have a pretty decent idea on these numbers and this information. And that's why this is a concerning situation to me, because if they need to pull forces from anywhere, it's going to generally be from inside of Kursk. There are a lot of brigades that are there at the moment, and this Belarusian invasion of this northern area could completely throw off all of the brigades that are currently involved in the Kursk offensive, and they will have to be recalled and withdrawn right back into the area around Kyiv. Or they will have to pull forces from the Vovchansk front, as there's still a decent amount of forces involved there. Not really a high amount. Most of those are down to a battalion level at this point. The Russians are also down to battalion level units in this area as well. But another big area where forces could be withdrawn from is from the Pokrovsk direction. We could see that a large amount of forces are pulled from there, as there is a large amount of intact brigades which have just been dedicated to the fighting in that area, and that could be a pretty concerning situation as well, considering that the defense in Pokrovsk isn't going that well, considering that the Russians have been able to achieve limited air superiority within this area and have been able to drop a large amount of air ordnance onto the Ukrainians, which is really why they've been able to make any ground so far in that direction, while they've been able to make it nowhere else. So with that in mind, I would have to say this is a pretty serious situation. I'm not violating OPSEC, and I'm also not going to say exactly where these brigades are north of Kyiv, but nevertheless, it's not a strong force up there. And that's why this is a very concerning thing. It's not like the Ukrainians just have unlimited manpower to pull off of. This is about all they have. And if this offensive was to start, they're going to be in a pretty bad spot because 2 territorial defense brigades, or 3 of them if you want to really stretch it, are going to have to hold down a 30,000 strong invasion force. This group is going to be outnumbered really almost like 3 Belarusians for every 2 Ukrainians. And that is not a good, that's not a kind of a good scale to go off of, and that's going on even the most optimistic end for the Ukrainians, and so they would be able to make ground until the Ukrainians brought reinforcements into the area, and who knows what would happen elsewhere in Ukraine or inside of Russia as a result of that. But
honestly, Enforcer, I would say that this situation is so serious, and it may or may not happen. I want to make that clear. I'm not like saying 100% that Belarus is going to invade. This could be a feint to scare Ukraine to back out of maybe Kursk, and maybe Russia's hoping that they'll simply preemptively pull out of Russia to protect their rear lines. That could be the case, but I would say this situation is so serious that it might be time for Poland to pull out maybe a Russia card and try to bluff Belarus into thinking that they would be invaded or attacked by Poland if they were to do this, because if Belarus invades with Wagner, the amount of threat that Kyiv would be under for actually being taken would be quite severe. I'm not saying that they would necessarily take it immediately or it'd be an easy fight for the Belarusians, but the threat here is very bad, because if they were to take Kyiv, that is the seat of government, and this war would be in pretty tough shape for the Ukrainians at that point. So they might want to go and bluff the situation, or at least attempt that, because otherwise, if we don't have deterrence, then they might actually pull the trigger under enough pressure from Putin.
And that may be possible. And really quickly, I also just tried to look around just so that way I can maybe allay some fears. The Ukrainians do have a very limited strategic reserve left of manpower to pull from. It appears to be about 6 brigades, but you have to remember that these 6 or 7 brigades have to be able to be pulled into literally anywhere in Ukraine if the situation got bad. So this is down to near depleted amounts of strategic reserve, because it would probably take all of those brigades being moved up into the area around Chernihiv. But the somewhat disconcerting thing about them is that out of all 7 of these brigades that they have at their disposal in the strategic reserve, they're also not that high a quality. Almost all of them are just infantry brigades. They're not motorized, they're not mechanized, they're not armored. They're just infantry brigades. And considering that they don't even have the designation of being motorized, that's also a little concerning as well. They do have 2 mechanized brigades that they can still call from in a strategic reserve, but we don't know the quality of those mechanized brigades at the moment. They may be made up of older, antiquated equipment. We don't know. But nevertheless, while we are talking about this concerning situation, we have reached the goal, baby!
Hey, we hit the goal! Gaga, Igor, let's go. I'm telling you what, the LSA pulled through again. $3.2 thousand, $200 above goal. Tremendous to see.
Man, I gotta say, absolutely impressive stuff. Huge shout out to y'all for raising that, because Revived Soldiers of Ukraine has done incredible work saving the lives of Ukrainian soldiers, and hopefully there won't have to be many of them left to be saved. Hopefully the war will end a lot sooner rather than later, but one can only hope on that at the moment, because of course we're talking about stuff like this. But still, with that, I hope we have addressed this the best we can, but it is time for us to move on from the Belarusian invasion news, or the possible invasion from Belarus, and on into the Kursk Oblast, because this has played a very important role, most likely, in the Belarusian decision-making that has been made so far. And so moving us on into the area, we have been able to see that the Russians got blasted today in Korenivo on film. These Russians are in a house inside of Korenivo town. Apparently the Ukrainians pulled a tank into Korenivo village and fired across the way right at these guys, as this guy was fumbling his mag and trying to figure out what was wrong with his AK. So here's the clip. You see him fumbling the mag and trying to clear the rifle. And in a second, things are about to go bad.
Выход, походу, был. О, ебать! Нахуй валим отсюда!
And he's gone.
What the hell? What happened again? What happened to the weapon?
Apparently there was some kind of a jam or something that he was trying to clear. He cleared it just in time for the tank shell to hit right at the base of the building, and this guy freaked out and ran for the hills right here. Like, here's the clip again. So this guy is trying to clear a jam or something like that. He clears it.
Выход, походу, был. О, ебать! Нахуй валим отсюда!
Man, I thought it was the gun blowing up on him. I was like, damn, that was a pretty bad jam, like a failure right there for it to blow up like that.
That dude, it's a nuclear failure. But anyways, moving on from that and on to another clip, we did get to see a Ukrainian soldier within the Korenivo district. Right up there on that sign, it says Korenivo Raion, which means Korenivo district. And we're going to be muting that, but we can see him standing there. We can also see him popping up in the drink. But once again, it is showing that the Ukrainians control an incredibly large part of the Korenivo district of the Kursk Oblast, because there is no threat in this video, from what we can tell, of incoming drones, incoming artillery fire, or anything else along those lines. They just control the area, and that's that. Once again, showing that the front line is far beyond where this sign is on the main road. Moving on from that and on into the area around Rekasim and the Russian brigade, which has been so perilously trapped south of the river for just about a week at this point, we have been able to see that the Russians are trying to find a way to get them out somehow. A Russian pontoon truck has made the arduous journey through the countryside, through practically nothing, because there's really no roads out here that connect to anything else. At least within this area near Kurish. And it drove all the way to the town of Kurish, where the last bridge, the third bridge, which we largely marked as unimportant throughout most of this opening of the offensive, they went and set up a pontoon bridge here. It seems that they did this because they believe that this may be the one crossing that will be hit the least and may allow them a larger window to retreat. We can actually see that that is not the case, because it looks like the pontoon bridge already sank into the river. The Ukrainians hit it. So it doesn't look like they did that well. We can also see that over here, there may be a little pontoon segment that is being laid out at that moment, but I don't know how long that one will last, because it looks like the one they had just set up was already destroyed, and then they're already desperately moving in more pontoon bridge segments to set up another bridge. So I don't believe that they're going to be succeeding in that at all. It seems like all Russian attempts to try and ford the river at this point have been fruitless, and we would assume that the Russians will most likely continue to have a very fruitless attempt, or fruitless efforts, of trying to end up getting their forces that are captured, or really stuck on the southern end of the river, back up onto the northern side. We don't think they'll ever be able to achieve that at this point, and this brigade may as well be doomed and lost as far as we are concerned. It would be pretty miraculous if they're even able to get a third of the brigade out at this point. We haven't heard about any of them being able to retreat, and from what we know, an entire brigade force element is still stuck on this side of the river. Moving on from that and into the area around Durovka, we were able to hear something a little bit interesting here today as well. The Russians claimed that they had pushed the Ukrainians back. I'm going to be showing y'all a map from the Institute for the Study of War. I once again want to keep this in mind for everyone. Our map is not made off of other people's maps. The only time that we've used another map to base what we have here on this map for is the map that was published by Oleksandr Syrsky during a briefing where he showed the exact Ukrainian front lines supposedly at that very moment he was showing them. That's the only map that we have consoled in. Beyond that, we require picture and video evidence and geolocation of that picture and video evidence to be able to properly adjust and account for our front line and what it looks like on this map. The Russians and the Institute for the Study of War claimed that the towns of Olgovka and Kremenyanyo were recaptured by the Russians. This was the map that they had the day before right here. This is the map that they then had the next day on the 25th. The problem with that is that we never documented that the Ukrainians ever took any of these towns. Like, none of them. The only one that we were able to confirm that the Ukrainians have taken was Kremenyo, right here. And we have never been able to confirm that the Russians have retaken it at the moment, because we have no video or picture evidence to be able to confirm that. So at this moment, we're not really sure if this map was accurate or inaccurate. I'm assuming that the Institute for Study of War had a reason to outline their map like this and show that the Ukrainians controlled an area like this, but we never were able to confirm that they made it that far north of Korenivo. I mean, they were so far north, that would have started to get to the point where it would start to directly threaten the Russian defenses inside of Korenivo, and we never really saw any wavering from the Russian defenses inside of Korenivo. It's been a slugfest over the past few days, and it's really been unchanged. It doesn't even look like they were preparing to withdraw or anything along those lines. So going on with that, we're not really sure if this is true or not. We have really no good way to confirm that because we never showed that the Ukrainians even controlled Olgovka in the first place. But moving on from that, it appears that this front line, from what we can understand, is remaining stable in this area, although the Battle of Korenivo is a pretty heavy one, and it seems as though the Ukrainians are getting mired down in the heavy combat that is occurring within the city, and maybe even the heavy combat that is occurring within the eastern flank, the major one that would be required to conduct an encirclement of the city, and then force the Russians to withdraw from the remainder of it. We did get to see, however, a picture of a sabotage and recon group soldier right here, carrying a CZ Bren 2 with a suppressor attached. Looks pretty nice. And the fella posing for the camera. Apparently this guy is a part of a special unit, a sabotage and recon unit, that breaches the line, largely as quietly and as stealthily as possible, to try and get behind the lines and conduct sabotage on Russian rear elements, such as artillery, logistics, command and communications centers, and also to try and conduct reconnaissance as well at the exact same time. This is largely the definition of frontline special forces operations. These are the exact kind of operations that Chinese special forces specialize in the outbreak of a full-scale war, and so it does appear that this soldier is a part of that unit, and it's very interesting to see his kit as well, because he's actually got a pretty decent amount of body armor, he's got a pretty decent vest, and he also has a pretty decent rifle as well, as we've heard that the CZ Bren is apparently a favorite amongst the Ukrainians, along with the AR-style rifles that we've also seen started to get very popular amongst the ranks. Meanwhile, near the area of Malaya Luknia, we also got to see a striker inside of Kursk as well. This pick went hard. I don't know what it is about this picture. It's a damaged striker, by the way. One of the tires was ruptured, but still, it is pretty cool to see this thing. And also, we can see the mine roller in front of the thing as well to clear the way of mines. Pretty cool to see this thing. I wish that we could see some of the strikers a little bit more that have been involved in this offensive, but we can't ask for too much. These are still incredibly cool pictures when we get to see them. And once again, showing that the mechanized brigades within the area do have a pretty decent or adequate amount of heavier armor. The striker is not that lightly armored like a BMP-1 or a BMP-2. It's kind of the middle ground. Well, not really the middle ground, but the best way to explain it is the middle ground in between the armor of a BMP or an MTLB and that of a main battle tank. Although that's a really, really bad comparison because even still, main battle tanks have far more armor than a striker ever would have. But moving on from that, we did also get to see that a Russian was captured today in the area heading towards the town of Lyubomovka. And we got to see that he had some interesting things to say. And so here's the clip.
Серега. Слава Україні! Кажи героям слава.
Героям слава.
Слава Україні! Не треба до відео тільки. Кажи, це для мене, блядь. Слава Україні! А куди ви так? Це для мене лично. Слава Україні, кажу.
Ну, слава Украине.
Героям слава.
Героям слава, только когда в Россию не передавайте.
Передам спеціальну
Oh, that was about to go sideways once the camera turned off.
Dude, he said, dude, don't film me, man. He was like, no, just say it. Dude, please don't film me. Okay. And then he said it. And then he was like, please don't post that to the rest. He's like, oh, I'm going to post it. It's like, dude, don't get him shot. Like, it's like he's already scared enough. You're going to get him handed back over to the Russians. They're going to go out and beat the guy with hammers or something like that. It's like, this isn't going to be a good situation. But still, once again, another Russian prisoner captured. And once again, showing that the Ukrainians, at least in some limited capacity at this point, are still overrunning and overtaking Russian positions around Bolshoi Soletskoy. Meanwhile, moving on down and into the area around Suja, we also got to see a Ukrainian soldier taking a moment to burn down a Russian billboard. While we mute that music, we can see the Z billboard right here, and we see the Ukrainian holding the torch under it, getting it nice and warm, so that way it'll start to burn. And it's starting to burn right now.
I can't stand that like silly ribbon. Like, how'd they make that ribbon into a Z and all of a sudden that was like a legendary symbol or something? It's so goofy looking.
It is really stupid. It's like, it's not even a letter in the Russian alphabet for that matter. It's like they say they hate the West so much, and then they use a letter from the Latin alphabet used in English to say that they're anti-Western and they're defending themselves. It's like, that's a little stupid. But still, it's nice to see that they're burning the thing. Hopefully they burned it all the way down. I would hope at least, but one can only dream at that point. You know what I mean? But with that, moving on out of that little bit of news, and on a little bit further down and into the area of Giri, we also got to see something interesting as well. This was something that I found to be funny because it says claim to be, I don't really think you have to claim it. I mean, this is clearly a Challenger 2. Like, you would have to be blind to say that this is anything other than a Challenger 2, but we can see it driving by right there, and we can also see it right there as well. And then, just to make sure that it is a Challenger 2, because they claim it's a Challenger 2, they say it's a Challenger 2, here's the pictures. Now, let me go and pull this up on the second screen here. Challenger 2, just so that way we can make sure that it is a Challenger 2, because they say it's a Challenger 2. But how are we really supposed to know this thing is a Challenger 2? That's a Challenger 2. Now, Matthew, they claim that this is a Challenger 2. Now, I'm not no genius or anything. I'm not no expert at nothing. And I'm a little bit of a silly fellow, a little bit of a goofy one, sometimes the screws are loose, but this does look a lot like a Challenger 2 to me, doesn't it?
It looks pretty close. Let me see it again. I mean, it's looking pretty close, ma'am. If it's not that, then it's a good replica.
I mean, it would have to be a great mock-up, because I would have never seen anything that was a Challenger 2 if it wasn't a Challenger 2. It is literally a Challenger 2. I don't know why some people say things like, it's claimed to be a Challenger 2. This thing is a Challenger 2. You can see the larger optic that's right above the gun right there. You can see that right here as well. You can see the same kind of a thermal sleeve on the 120mm barrel that you would find on the Challenger 2. You can see the same thermal evacuator. Not the thermal evacuator, the barrel evacuator that's right there on the main gun. You can also see that little front block on the muzzle as well. You can also see the same sight on the top of the turret right over there that you see right here for the commander. You can also see the same turret cheek kind of an angle, both on the Y and X axis, best way for me to say that. You can also see the smoke grenade dischargers in the same spot. Hull has the exact same shape. Hell, even the side flaps are identical. This is a Challenger 2. If it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. This thing is a Challenger 2, and it is showing that the 82nd Air Mobile Brigade has been able to move in their heavy armor into the area, and it's not just rumor anymore like it has been for the longest time. The Challenger 2s are involved in the Kursk offensive. This means that all 13 of them may be rotated in and out while the offensive is ongoing by the 82nd Air Mobile, because the 82nd Air Mobile is the only brigade in Ukrainian service that has access to Challenger 2s. They were provided in very limited numbers. There was only 14 of them provided. One of them was destroyed during the 2023 summer offensive by a very lucky Russian artillery hit, the only one to be destroyed by enemy action in history. But beyond that, the other 13 still serve with the 82nd, and we can see one of them clearly inside of Kursk at this moment during this short 2-second video, and also these pictures right here. So with that, we are starting to see that the Ukrainians have a decent amount of heavier armor in the area. Not just Soviet-style main battle tanks, but also Western main battle tanks as well. This is once again letting us know that the Ukrainians have brought in a heavy amount of firepower that they have been able to call upon since the start of the offensive. And from what we understand, the Russian brigades that are being moved up to the front only at this point, really just a few days ago, finally started to get enough firepower to be able to counter the Ukrainians with the tank firepower they had and also artillery support. So at this point, it appears that the Ukrainians and the Russians are still kind of slated for a slugging fest in this area, and the Ukrainians seem to still be winning that little by little, still taking a village here and there and gaining more ground with each passing day during this offensive. At the exact same time, we also got to see in the Sumy Oblast that the Ukrainians actually do have operational Tachkas. Tachkas are very limited in number at this point. We used to talk about these a lot earlier on in the war when both sides used them heavily, but since then we've seen that both sides have largely depleted the stockpile, and Tachkas are not used that much any longer. The Ukrainians still have a few, and they appear to be on standby around the area of the Kursk Oblast to be called upon and used whenever they need to be. They have a range not that far. It's really like 70 miles. It's not a really long-range missile, and Uragan can largely reach out to those kinds of ranges, but it does have a significant amount of firepower in that thing. It's about a 500-pound warhead, so it can pack a little bit of a punch. And if the Ukrainians ever needed a really heavy punch inside of the area of the Kursk Oblast, the Tachkas could be called upon as a last resort option. But with that, it does seem as though the Kursk offensive is still going fairly well. The Ukrainians are meeting heavier resistance at this point in some areas, but still, they are making a little bit of progress here and there, especially on the western flank around Glishkovo. Moving on from that, though, a lot of people have been talking about what NATO should do as a whole, because while Ukraine is doing well in Kursk, we do have this major Belarusian offensive that is looming over everyone's heads at this point, and everyone's trying to figure out what should be done about it, if anything. Should NATO get involved? Should they not? Especially if the Belarusians start to invade. And a lot of people have really thrown in a load of comments and opinions on this idea. And Matthew, what are people thinking and saying about this? Do they think that NATO should get involved if the Belarusians started to invade Ukraine? Or do they think that it should just be a one-off, like France or Poland doing it on their own? And what do you think as well?
So it looks like 49% of the audience, almost the majority, said yes, NATO should enter the war immediately if Belarus invades Ukraine, while 29% said, let Poland enter first, but not NATO. And 15% said, no, NATO should not enter the war under any circumstance. So on this one, I gotta say that NATO entering the war would be probably the most earth-shattering thing that's ever happened in modern history. So that has to be taken very seriously. It can't be just done lightly. So me personally, I would say let Poland enter first. If they're willing to enter the war on Ukraine's behalf and help fight Belarus, I would say let them enter first volitionally on their own. So that way NATO does not get involved initially. And then if things start getting out of hand and Poland is indeed threatened on their home turf, then I would say NATO needs to think about maybe invoking Article 5, regardless of what the circumstances are. So I would say we need to be very careful before we just simply send NATO in and start fighting in the war, because that would basically mean, in my opinion, World War III. And we don't want that. As much as we want to defend Ukraine, we need to put the good of the many people ahead of just a few. So that's just the sad reality of it. So I would be with the 29%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that if things start to get very serious inside of the area, I believe that NATO should consider entering immediately. While Matthew is saying that there should be a bit of a reservation there, I would believe that the United States needs to step forward and finally start to directly militarily intervene, as we may see that some sort of a peace agreement is made that is actually amenable to Western and Ukrainian interests at that point, as the Russians would want to avoid a larger scale conflict with the West. I also believe that at the same time that the Belarusians begin to enter this war, we may actually see that the Ukrainians get permanently put on the back foot. While I've generally downplayed the competency and the abilities of the Belarusian armed forces, that was during the entirety of the war where Ukraine had a large strategic reserve to call upon that was very competent and very capable of delivering a deadly blow to any Belarusian invasion force that was entering. At this point, that picture has changed differently. That deadly force that could give a fatal blow to Belarus if they were to enter the war is currently invading Russia right now. They're not around to be able to be called upon to try and stop a Belarusian offensive. So if this offensive begins, Ukraine could have bitten a little bit more than it could chew, considering all the offensives it took on, and now the new one that they did not want to take on, and they could be on the back foot permanently, and we could lose all of our interests within this region within a year, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And so going off of that, I would largely have to say that the United States, not Poland, not France, the United States as the leader of the Western sphere, should step forward and make sure to militarily intervene if possible, if Ukraine, which is the side we're backing, is going to get close to losing. That would be my opinion, at least at the moment. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Before we move on from that, Matthew, I do understand that we have raised about $3,700 for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine, an unbelievable amount. That is incredibly huge. And also, Matthew, I understand that we have a list of top donors tonight who have been able to make this fundraiser possible. And so, who are they, Matthew? Who are their names?
All right, so we've had some very big donations coming in tonight for the Revived Soldiers of Ukraine. A very good cause indeed. We've fundraised for them many times in the past and probably will many times in the future as well. So they're a favorite of the channel, and we've definitely donated a ton of funds on behalf of the LSA for them, so it's good to see. Also, the largest donation of the night thus far is from Miss Disa, who threw in a $500 donation, a massive donation, and a huge shout to Miss Disa for that generosity, the largest one of the night. We also had a $200 from Andy L, very large as well as a $150 from Tom S, as well as a $125 from AJ, and a $111 from Pint of Guinness, And also we had a $100 from some guy called the Enforcer that hangs out around here quite a lot. Also we had a $100 from Hal Rose, as well as Just Chillin', along with Toadman the First, and then a $75 from Gene Kustra, and then we just had a $100 come in from Trister1, longtime channel legend, and then we had a $54 coming in from Paramecium13, as well as a $50 from Greg Carrier, Axel K, Purple Gerbil, Cameron B, Snow White, Char G, as well as Matt Shear, Peace with War, LSA Sergeant Figment, Tom S, Dad Good, and also Mike Smith. And that is all the top donors thus far of the night. And once again, huge shout out to everybody that's donated tonight, because you've all helped us get up to $3,732 raised of the $3,000 goal. So about $730 above goal. Tremendous to see. And we'll probably head even higher than that before the stream's over. So once again, huge shout out to the LSA. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say a massive thanks to everyone who has been supporting this fundraiser night and helping it. It has been absolutely incredible to see so many people gathering together and helping out the revived soldiers of Ukraine, much like the Lee Spring Army has done every single week since this channel has been able to run fundraisers. We have raised well over $1 million. It's around $1.4 million at this point through all of the nonprofits that we have supported and fundraised for on this channel. And once again, like every single night in channel history, the Lee Spring Army did not miss the goal and ended up over exceeding it once again. That is absolutely incredible. I got to give a massive shout out to everyone who's been involved in that tonight, because if it was not for y'all's generous donations to revive soldiers of Ukraine, they may not be able to help another Ukrainian soldier to walk again, to be able to deal with the injuries that they sustained on the front lines, the injuries that they took not only defending Ukraine, but fighting for the Western world really as a whole and our interests within the region as well. I got to give you all a massive thanks for always having a huge amount of generosity on these fundraisers and continuously supporting and helping these folks out, because if it was not for y'all, some people's lives out there may not be changed, and they have y'all to thank for it, whether they know it or not. And so a big thanks to y'all once again. And with that, also, by the way, before we move on, I do have to give a shout out to everyone that we weren't able to call out as well. We can only call out folks who put in a donation over $50, because there are so many people who put in donations every single night that it would physically be infeasible to call off everyone. But we still thank each and every single person who has been involved in this fundraiser night, whether we were able to call you out or not, whether you had your name in the live chat, whether you were an anonymous donor who is supporting the fundraiser like we have right now. We got to thank each and every one of y'all, because every single one of y'all comes together, both big and small donations, to be able to make the fundraiser total possible. It's everyone working together in the Lee Spring Army that makes this reality a possibility for us every single day. Because while we call out the top donors, and the top donors certainly do put a massive amount of support into those fundraisers, a little over half of it, or a little under half of it, just around there every single time, would not be possible if it wasn't for all of the donors who were throwing in less than $50 of support each. So a huge thanks to y'all once again. A massive thanks to the folks we were able to call out, and a massive thanks to the folks that we weren't able to call off, because each and every one of y'all had a major role to play in tonight's fundraiser. And so with that, we are now moving on into a couple of questions. We actually have about 3 questions that we're going to be answering at this point, and then we're going to move on into the rest of the news that we have for tonight inside of Ukraine. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so real quick, before we grab our 3 questions, I want to give a shout out to BC Skyman as well, who threw in a $100 donation to the fundraiser. And also, huge shout out to BC Skyman, the channel legend, for once again coming through on a Sunday and helping us to hit that goal. We just crossed over 4,000, by the way, and we're making our way toward 5,000. I wonder if that's going to be hit tonight, because last time it was hit and the goal was 3,000, so tonight it might happen as well. But with that, we're jumping into our first question, which goes to Mick. He said, will Poland get involved if Belarus does invade Ukraine?
We're not entirely sure, because while we would think that Poland would get involved, talking and doing are entirely different things that a country can do. A country can say things up and down, all around, all day long, every day. Like how North Korea is going to kill the wicked American imperialists and bring peace to the world. And they've been saying that ever since they existed back in the late 40s. They have never been able to achieve that a single time ever in their history. So talk is one thing, action is another. We don't really know if the Polish would back up their talk entirely if push came to shove in this situation. I would hope that they would, but I can't say with certainty that they would. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I can't really give definitive answers on that, and I really don't want to, because I don't know what people in the Polish government may end up doing. You may have Andrzej Duda wanting to do one thing, and then Donald Tusk wanting to do another. You could have completely different people inside of the Polish parliament that I don't even know about that would end up affecting the end result on what the Polish government would actually do. We're just not entirely sure, and it would be very hard to say, because I can't really get into the heads and minds of the Polish government and figure out exactly what they were thinking and what they are committed to if such a thing was to unfold. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of this segment.
All right, and this one goes to Paramecium13, who said, if Belarus gets involved in Ukraine, could Ukraine then just push through the weak Belarusian defenses and then threaten St. Petersburg?
No, I would doubt that. St. Petersburg is all the way up north of Russia. Like, even if you pushed all the way through Belarus and conquered the entire nation, bringing Lukashenko to his knees and forcing him to join the ranks of Chris's mother, it would still be an additional 276 miles to St. Petersburg. And at that point, I have a feeling the Russians would be nuking the Ukrainians before they started to get to St. Petersburg, considering that that is the second largest city in the Russian Federation, probably one of the most strategically important cities outside of Moscow, and for that reason, the Russians would not allow them to go straight for St. Petersburg. On top of that, we also have to be realistic. The Ukrainian offensive within the Kursk region has been able to, at its deepest, achieve about, and let me make sure to find Kromsky Bicky here, to achieve about a 20-mile breakthrough. So 20 miles versus 276 miles, also having to make your way all the way through Belarus to even get to that 276-mile jaunt, I would find that to be highly unlikely. Not only that, they don't have the strategic reserves, really at this point, from what we understand, to be able to hold off and fight against a massive, well, not a massive, but a large Belarusian invasion force of around 30 to 40,000 troops. That would be pretty difficult for Ukraine at this point, and so I'd highly doubt that they'd be able to turn the tables and then pretty much march onwards 550 miles through Belarus and into Russia to be able to take St. Petersburg. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're getting on into the rest of the news that we have for tonight.
All right, and the final one goes to Robert Orzek, who says, will Ukraine be allowed to use ATACMS if Belarus attacks?
Let's see. That's a good question. I would assume that the United States probably would not allow it, because the United States is pretty dogged and just really taking the weakest approach that you can. Like, you know, we'll give them an ATACMS, and then we'll tell them you can only use it 50 miles from the front line. And it's like, why do we give them a 150-mile range weapon when we put these silly restrictions on it? I would assume that we probably wouldn't. I feel like the common sense thing at that point would be to allow them to throw everything they want at the Belarusians to stop them. Even if it is our weaponry, what does it matter? You know, the Belarusians will just have to live with the fact it's our weapons hitting them. But for some reason, I would assume and highly doubt that the United States would allow our weapons to be used in any way, shape, or form, in a major form, against Belarus at any point, even if Belarus started to invade Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can, in my opinion. And with that, we're now going to be moving on from that question segment and on down into the area of Proletarius, because I do have to keep y'all updated. The fire still burns. 8 days later, the fire is still going strong.
Кадры портятся, замутненные получаются кадры.
That's a big fire, Bliat. It looks like the lungs they're filling with the smoke, Bliat. It's not good for the lungs. It's bad for the alveoles and all that.
But still, it looks as though Proletarisk is not doing well, and it looks like the fire's still burning. 8 days later, that's the longest burning fire we've ever seen in Russia. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into the location unknowns, as we were able to see a little bit more information today presented by United 24 about the long-range drone that they have at their disposal. And so check it out.
Every Ukrainian knows the word palynytsia. It refers to a type of bread. It is used to distinguish Russians. Due to differences in language, they cannot pronounce it correctly. But now they will have to learn this word from a completely different perspective. The state has launched a grant program for private rocket projects, invested in state design bureaus, and implemented deregulation to stimulate this industry. And here are the first results. Introducing Palynytsia, the first Ukrainian long-range rocket drone. Most of its technical characteristics are classified to avoid revealing capabilities to the enemy. However, we have learned a few details. 24 Russian military airfields are within its strike range. The production team consists of specialists from various fields, including people who had never worked with defense technologies, but due to enemy aggression, took up the development of Palynytsia. The work involved two aspects unusual for military industry. The first is the pace. It was developed in just a year and a half. To achieve this, the team worked without days off or vacations throughout the whole period.
They're like us, Matthew. They're like us.
Call us the rocket makers. We're taking no breaks.
Man, the Rocket Man.
Their motivation was solid.
Corny.
The longer the delay, the more peaceful Ukrainians die. The second aspect is that the developers did not consider the project's profitability, which is common in the defense sector. Their only priorities are reliability and effectiveness. The structural features are classified. Well, almost. The Polyanitsa will be launched from a ground platform. It uses a turbojet engine. It is equipped with electronic countermeasures. The rocket drone is connected to a satellite and therefore knows its exact location. If the connection is lost, there are other systems to keep it on the required trajectory. And what about the price and number of rocket drones? Modern systems cost millions of dollars per launch. Here, the cost is much lower than its counterparts. Moreover, the work on cutting the cost and increasing production is ongoing. Why is this so important? In the 2.5 years of full-scale war, Russia has launched over 43,000 various types of missiles and glide bombs at Ukraine. It still dominates the air. Yet the Americans and the Brits still do not allow the use of their ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles against Russian airfields, where carriers of missiles and heavy aerial bombs are based. So Ukraine is looking for its own response. Real Russian air bases catch fire from
Narrator's going
Ukrainian
in hard on
drone
the
raids
beat.
more and more often. Just on the night of August 14th, military airfields Halina, Savasleika, Borisogledsk, and Baltimore were hit. On August 21st, a radio reconnaissance center and an airport near Moscow, as well as the Millerovo air base. News of drone attacks on Russia is now almost daily. Sounds good, but rocket drones are better. They fly faster and carry a larger warhead. So Russian airfields, be ready. The goal of the Polyanitsa is to destroy the enemy's offensive potential, and to do it on their territory. The first Ukrainian long-range rocket drone, Polyanitsa.
Why the hell does
Damn,
this
it's like
look
a movie trailer.
Why the hell does this look like one of those book covers, man, where it's like, Gligemuts, the way the Germans planned on killing Hitler in World War II or something like that. It's like a book cover for a book like that. It's like, huh,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
I never know what the Ukrainians are going for. They're editing sometimes. Like, it starts off like a documentary, and then it slowly turns into like a movie trailer, and then they add some trap to it. I'm like, I'm not sure really what they're going for here, but it's pretty cool.
Man, it's called that Ukrainomatic, like, or something like that. And then you have that narrator, the Ukrainomatic, meant to make sure that everyone's really happy with our video production, or something like that. But still, pretty cool to see that drone. And with that, we're moving on to the next clip, where we actually got to see the Ukrainians taking out the Russian version of a kamikaze drone in a helicopter. Check this out. They're literally flying alongside that thing, and they're just going to hose it down with a little machine gun here. Can't go wrong with that, can you? He's going to line that thing up. He's going to start firing at it, and oh, buddy, he got it. Look at that. He is laying that thing down. Oh, and they got it. Down it goes. Nice to see. Straight into the drink. Glug, glug, glug. But with that, we're moving on from that clip and on to our next one, where we also got to see that the Russians are now outfitting their vehicles with even better and newer drone protection. Introducing the rubber.
Плюс обшито со всех сторон. Двери еще доработанные, там металл дополнительный. Плюс, да, сейчас покажу, не скажу. Вот таким образом она вся доработана. И глушилка включается дистанционно кнопкой.
Oh, they have a switch.
I just want to put this out there for everyone. While this rubber may be not so well of a protective measure against incoming Ukrainian drones against this Russian buhanka, rubbers in Russia, if used properly, would help to reduce national stupidity. However, the Russians seem to be amiss about this fact and have decided instead to use the rubber on the Russian buhankas instead. And that seems to be a sorely missed opportunity at national improvement that could be used. Moving on from the rubber and on into our next bit of location unknown news, we also got to see the Russian casualty report. And it was quite high.
Oh, no, it was juicy today. 17 Bobcats. I'm telling you what, you're going to need more than one rubber truck for that. But, man, these lusts are looking crazy. Tell us some more.
And the numbers are wonderful. 1,190 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 11 APCs, 92 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 47 artillery pieces, 31 drones, 2 MLRSs, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 17 Bulbul-kit skid steers. It is an incredibly good day, and the losses are as high as they always are. Very good day, very happy to see, very nice. Very nice! Moving on from that. And also, Matthew, I can tell you, the results are in. The sliders are bad. They are horrendous. Like just letting you know, they're pretty damn rough. But moving on.
Oh, the sliders. Oh, you're talking about that. Okay, yeah. If y'all didn't know it, last night I was actually in a rough state last night, but I was powering through it. It seems like I have a bad streak with food at this point. I ate some White Castle like Crystal Burger things that you get out of the freezer section. Oh, they jacked me up good. But it wasn't as bad as the Chipotle, but it was rough. And now the enforcer's going through too. So I was wondering what was up. You sound a little demure. I was wondering what was happening.
Oh, that's exactly it. Because if y'all didn't know, Matthew last night before the stream was doing horrendously. He was like, dude, these sliders are terrible. I was like, I don't know, man. I was like, maybe your stomach just didn't agree with them or something today. I was like, I'm sure they can't be that bad. So then I ate them today, like right before the stream, which was a really stupid idea. I should have waited until after and ate something else before. So now I've eaten them, and I can confirm the sliders are bad. Like, we're going to have to go throw those out. They're brand new too. Like, it's not like it's like a year old like pack of frozen sliders. This stuff is brand new. We just got it from the store like 2 days ago, and apparently the stuff's bad. So we're going to go and toss that after the stream because I'm not eating another one of those again. We're just going to have to go and try and find another batch of them that's actually good. But yikes, pretty rough stuff. Anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see the 3rd Brigade hitting some Russian forces today. And we're going to be muting that. But we can see the drone going on in. But that's why I sound a little bit lower energy tonight and a little bit more monotone, Matthew, is because I'm trying to power through this thing. You know what I mean?
Well, good job, good job. Also, I'm getting messages from literally everybody talking about you need better food choices. It's time to man up. We really do. Like, honestly, we eat the fast stuff because like we need to eat something really quickly to get to work. But in reality, we need to like take a moment just to like make something decent because I don't think the fast food's been killing me recently. Like literally, like it's been putting me through the ringer. So we're going to put a stop to it.
Yeah, we're going to have to put a stop to it. And also, we know that better food is good for you, but the problem is that better food takes time. And because we work on this channel so much, or there's other things going on that takes up all of our time, we don't really have a lot of time to really get good food. But hopefully that will change soon. Hopefully maybe. Because one thing I will say is that there's a certain kind of meal service that we've been on out there that actually does let you eat good food, like good real food, and is it good? They don't. Sadly, they just never have enough of it. It seems because you always go starving really quickly, and then you have to eat crappy food still. But the food's really good. We did get to see, however, the 3rd Brigade conducting an assault in the Kharkiv direction. Check this out. Boom! The rear door goes down. The fun begins. See our fella here.
Nice gun.
I think that's an M249. Someone corrects me if I'm wrong.
До рухаємося. Розсосалися.
See him moving through the underbrush, rifle fire cracking all around him.
Скала, річ, Фредик, за мною!
Melody Francis said, Mom's been cooking for you. Oh yeah, she does. She does cook, and I'm so happy she does. She's probably the best cook out there. Food's delicious every time. I just wish there was more of it though, because you always get hungry afterwards, and while it's like a 10 out of 10 meal every single time, you just get hungry afterwards, and then you have to eat more. the story of life, I suppose.
Big shout out to HelloFresh, by the way. We're never going to get sponsored by them, so we might as well say their name.
Yeah, true. Apparently they believe war dims the appetite, but I have to say, people in war eat just like everyone else does, and hopefully good, with HelloFresh. Something like that. But anyways, we see the Ukrainians continue.
Man, we're saying hello nasty right now to this food we're eating.
Oh man, the sliders, ugh. Just for y'all to know, I'll tell y'all the exact brand and everything, so, you know, maybe, hopefully their quality control.
Well.
Не чую! 30 метрів, 40, окопна лінія підарів. Хай накриває нахуй. Цей йобаний кулеметник не дає пройти, блядь, заїбав він нахуй.
By the way, if you're enjoying the stream, make sure to subscribe. We're only 4 subscribers away from 269,000 subs. You could be the 269th nice thousand sub.
Плюс.
But anyways, getting back to the clip in all seriousness. The firefight continues.
Хай роз'єбують нахуй ту хуйню, блядь. Сука, не дає пройти, блядь, вообще, блядь. Лінія, блядь!
Надо что-то думать. Значит,
Ми там вирватись, бо там участок. Він нас розстріляє нахуй.
And we did it. We hit 269,000.
Да.
Big shout out.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. Nice.
Бо ми, блядь, сука, стоїмо нахуй. Ми тільки підлазимо, він, блядь, хуярить. Я, блядь, як у кнопну лінію заскочу, я того кулеметика голими руками нахуй задушу, блядь.
плохой! Повольно!
А ну похую, блядь.
Why does it sound like a kid out there?
I don't know.
Like a 5-year-old.
You sound like that.
Можна пивка, пожалуйста, блядь. Ну, серйозно. Просто, блядь.
This guy's talking calmly like he's just in his living room or something while the war's going on.
He's like, dude, can you believe this? They're firing at us. Crazy, right? Like, he's just like calm as a cucumber. But moving on from that and down into the area around Chesivyar, we also got to see Ukrainian T-64B down here. BV, actually. Also, by the way, this soundtrack here is the goofiest one. I have to play a little bit of it because it just literally the only thing said in the entire song is, I have a friend from Ukraine. And here it is.
I have a friend from Ukraine.
I don't know what the point of that is.
Better now.
I have a friend from Ukraine. But then we can see the T-64BV and that thing whipping it. Ooh!
I'm being told that was a women's in that last video.
Oh. I wasn't even paying attention that much, really. I was having to go and look at something else. So I was sitting there and I didn't hear or really see it too well. And so you were like, what was that? Was that a kid? And I was like, hey, that looks like a grenade over here. And I didn't even know. But anyways, moving on from that and down into the area around Avdiivka, we did get to see down in the Donetsk region. An Mi-8 ended up having an emergency landing. And it was one hell of an emergency landing. I mean, the tail rotor busted, the top rotors busted, the fuselage busted, the bottom tires busted, and still, it just doesn't even get close to Chris's mom. Oh, look, thermal deflectors. That's actually kind of rare.
Man.
You don't see that a lot. But still,
hard landing, Eternal Flight Brothers.
I'm telling you, eternal flight. I mean, really. But moving on from that and over into the area of Yasno-Brodivka, we also got to see the 80th Air Assault hitting some Russian forces around E. Oh, that's a mortar. Boom. Mortar gone. Rest in pieces. Oh, that's a Russian checkpoint. Get the hell out of here. Boom. It's gone. Boom, it's gone. I don't even know what the hell that was. It's gone now. Does not matter. Look, a vehicle. Boom, it's gone. Look, another one. That's an artillery piece right there. Boom, it's gone. Look.
Another one. Real life.
Real trap. Walk with your boys. Damn, son, where'd you find this? Oh, a Bohanka pickup. It's gone.
Some words.
The words! The words!
No.
I have to drop out. But moving on from
Listen,
that.
can we move on to the next one? I mean, I'm not going to stand around here all day waiting for the bear to show up in Central Park.
Oh man, goodness gracious! What a thing. But anyways, here's some Russians getting shot at by an Abrams. Here's the Abrams. Here it comes. That is an Abrams. Boosh! Fires the shell. Bam! It hits dead on the nail. Damn! That's impressive. And there it goes. It just goes scooting off right after that. Pretty cool to see. Hopefully the Ukrainians can continue to get a little bit more juice out of these Abrams, because I like seeing them in action, me personally. Moving on from that and down into the area around Rykov, we also got to see an Su-24 in Ukrainian colors, flying along with another Su-24 as they fire off their Storm Shadow and Scalp EG missiles. Look at that picture. Is that cool or is it not? I'm not taking any other answers. It is cool, period. And so I'm glad that everyone agrees. And so moving on.
I have to say, that's a pretty cool thing when you see the fighter jets outside the window. That's when you know that you're winning the war and the industrial complex is coming in strong.
When I was a young boy in the 80s, I went and stole a Russian MiG from a Soviet airfield or something like that, and I flew it to Japan and I landed it there or something like it's some crazy crap like that. But anyways, moving on from that and a little bit further on down the line and into Nova Kakhovka, we also get to see the 35th Marines hitting some Russians down here. Okay. They said, what video effects would you like for your intro? And they said, yes. And so now here's the clip. And they are just slamming them in the 35th Brigade.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello? I can hear you now.
Question of that fella, it went dark. Everything I was saying wasn't coming through.
The AR is trying to silence me or something like that.
He put the worm in the mic.
The worms!
That's a damn bad worm. That worm gets in everything and just screws it all up.
I was around in 1940s Britain when the bombs started to fall or something like that. Man, you know, like that fella just turns into the real life version of Forrest Gump. Wherever anything bizarre or questionable happened, he was there. But
man, I'm telling you what, those stories are crazy. The bear in the park one did me in though. Once I heard that, I was like, that's all I need to know.
Just like, when I was around Central Park, I dropped a bear carcass into the park or something like that.
Staged the crash with a bicycle.
Yeah,
put it in the trunk.
A bicycle took out a whole bear. I heard there's bears in this area. I'm gonna wipe one out with a bicycle. Like that makes sense. And all speaking of which, the Ukrainians didn't wipe out bears with a bicycle. They wiped out Russians with bombs. Pretty impressive stuff. And with that, that's the end of the clip. Still very interesting to see. And with that, we are now going to be moving on from this area, from everything that went on down here, into Kazan. Because we got to see that a military center caught on fire today. Tisn't it a shame? Dang, they were flying.
Damn. Man, this is the town goons that come flying through when the fire's raging.
Man, only in Russia can you get this kind of stuff. But moving on from that and into the area around Moscow, we finally got to see one of the Pantsir towers at work. Y'all know these, right? Like these stupid towers they built and then they put the Pantsirs on top of them with the crane. We finally saw one in action. It's the first time ever. Here's the clip. No?
Crap. That's a fast missile.
Сколько она по времени перезаряжается?
Охуеть! Okay. I was around Moscow in the 2020s. I coordinated a Ukrainian drone strike or something like that. I tried to make it look like it was firecrackers or something like that. Anyways, moving on. And down into the area around Kyiv. It is time for us to get on into the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 914 of the war. And so,
Wait, could you give me real speech today? We have 5 minute 40-second speech, long-lasting speech.
Long-lasting speech. Can we get real speech? Long-lasting speech. And we will, Matthew, just for you. And so, without further ado,
Thank you.
Here is the speech. Speech!
Дорогі українці, українки, увесь день сьогодні в Краматорську тривав розбір завалів після удару російської ракети. Постраждали, зокрема, журналісти, знімальна група агенції Reuters, громадяни України, Америки та Британії. Звичайний міський готель був зруйнований російським «Іскандером». Абсолютно цілеспрямовано, продумано. Від цього удару 7 людей постраждали, 1 людина загинула, мої співчуття рідним та близьким. І це щоденний російський терор, який продовжується. Бо Росії є можливість продовжувати. Сьогодні ж російські удари по нашій Сумщині, кабами, по Харківщині, по Херсонщині, по Донеччині. І за все це світ має не зупинятись у тиску на державу-терориста. За ракетні удари, за каби, за штурми, загалом за всю цю війну. Росія повинна бути змушеною шукати миру. А отже, потрібно, щоб санкції проти Росії та пов'язаних з нею осіб діяли повністю. Щоб заморожені російські активи реально працювали для захисту від Росії і якнайшвидше. Є рішення Великої Сімки про 50 мільярдів для України від російських активів. І потрібен реальний механізм, щоб вже в цьому році кошти пішли на підтримку нашої держави і людей. І потрібно, щоб не було будь-яких затримок в логістиці для нашої оборони, щоб наші воїни могли діяти саме так, як вимагає фронт. Наразі ми маємо деякі гучні оголошення про оборонні пакети від партнерів для України, які місяцями не реалізовуються повністю. Ми маємо також і домовленості щодо ППО, які досі на стадії виконання. І це особливо важливо напередодні навчального року. Я дякую всім нашим партнерам, які дійсно допомагають, всім лідерам, які працюють разом із нами заради більш надійного нашого захисту, більш надійних наших позицій. Але час означає втрати. І чим довше ми змушені очікувати, тим більше шкоди встигне завдати Росія. І всі наші розмови з лідерами, всі перемовини саме про це, про швидкість і силу спільних рішень, про виконання наших домовленостей. Жодного дня світ не має забувати, що разом ми сильніші, ніж будь-який терорист. Але для цього потрібно робити дійсно все, щоб терорист програв. І хочу сьогодні особливо відзначити наші сили, які забезпечують російську відповідальність вже зараз, тими силами, які у нас, і які ми робимо постійно міцніше. Всі наші підрозділи Збройних сил України, Нацгвардія, ГУР, Служба безпеки України, які працюють на нашу українську далекобійність. Кожен, хто відбиває російські штурми на фронті, і особливо зараз на Донеччині, кожен, хто реалізовує захисну операцію в Курській області. Я дякую усім вам, воїни. Також незмінна вдячність усім виробникам нашої української зброї, постачальникам всіх необхідних компонентів, розробникам, кожному і кожній, хто дійсно працює заради України. Зокрема, сьогодні ми вже показали нашу паляницю, нашу нову ракету-дрон, і таких наших розробок, такої нашої зброї буде більше. Але, звичайно, є завдання, які виконають паляниці, нептуни, а є завдання, які можуть виконати атакамси, штормшедоу, скальпи. та інша зброя партнерів. Говорив щойно із главкомом Сирським. Є просування наше в Курській області від 1 до 3 кілометрів. Взяли під контроль ще 2 населених пункти. Тривають активні дії щодо ще одного населеного пункту. Є поповнення обмінного фонду. Дякую. Також обговорили окремо нашу Донеччину, наші захисні дії. Найбільше уваги Новогродівка, Водяне, найбільше штурмів. Вдячний всім нашим підрозділам за стійкість. І ще одне, що стосується тих осіб, хто працює проти нашої держави. Зрадників України, які допомагали російській агресії чи виправдовують її, які втекли з України, ховаючись від відповідальності. Нашій державі потрібні чіткі відповіді щодо таких осіб, чітка відповідальність, щоб всі ці товариші отримали те, на що заслуговують, де б вони не ховались і куди б не побігли. На завтра я призначив нараду за участю керівників правоохоронних органів України, СБУ, МВС, ДБР, також будуть керівники НАБУ, САП, голова Державної прикордонної служби України, Генеральний прокурор, представники розвідки. Багато речей треба завтра обговорити на цій зустрічі і висновків зробити. Слава Україні!
And Herom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 914 of the war. And that is moving us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. It's an incredibly fun segment. We absolutely enjoy. We relish. Unlike the hot dog man, which gets no relish, we relish this segment because it is an incredibly fun one where we get to sit back and kind of chit chat with all of y'all a great deal about what's been going on today and what y'all want to talk about in what pertains to it. It's a fun time. I absolutely love it. But I also got to give a massive, huge shout out to the 17.5 thousand people who were here at the peak of the stream tonight, and also the 112,000 people who have watched this stream so far. We are always entirely honored and very humbled that so many people choose this channel to be y'all's source of news. We've got to thank y'all massively for always enjoying the stream, always just always being here. Well, it really does amaze us. It blows us away that so many people are always here with us every single day, and we thank y'all for once again being here with us tonight. If y'all did enjoy it a lot, please make sure to subscribe, make sure to like and comment. We still have a lot to go, so you can still like and comment a little bit later, but we would like to see y'all like and comment now. I mean, we just hit 269,000 subscribers. We are now 19,000 subscribers above 250. We are 1,000 subscribers away from 270, and we're only 31,000 subscribers away from 300,000. Pretty wild to think that the channel has grown so fast, this quick, but it is really cool to see that it has. Also, I see a lot of people asking, is there any Israel news? Not really. We haven't seen a lot of video and picture evidence today to back up what we were talking about yesterday, with this being a larger confrontation and occurrence. So at the moment, we really don't have much to talk about in this area at this time. So we'll be waiting for more news to develop and then revisit it again here soon.
I got a little bit of news for the Middle East if you want to hear it.
Oh, sure.
So right now, what the situation in the Middle East is this. Last night, we saw Hezbollah launch a somewhat of a limited attack, actually, on Israel. Nothing of significance was really hit or destroyed, so relatively not too bad from the Hezbollah side. But we did see Israeli preemptive strikes on several targets that were pre-programmed to fire, that were rockets ready to go. Israel took them out literally like 15 minutes before they were scheduled to fire. So a success on the preemptive strikes. But we just saw an article come out a moment ago saying that Reuters reports that Israel and Hezbollah have exchanged messages via mediators that they do not wish to escalate the conflict. So what we could have seen last night was maybe a half-hearted attempt to make it look like Hezbollah is trying to save face, and maybe they're not going to escalate to a full-on regional war. That might be the case, but that's where we're currently at on the whole thing in the Middle East. So nothing happening at the moment. So it's laying pretty low, and it could stay that way.
Interesting. I thank you for sharing that. That must be why it didn't cross my radar today, because it didn't appear to be escalating any further. But still, with that, thank you for sharing that little bit of an update on what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. And with that in mind, it is now time for us to get around to talking to each and every one of y'all. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving into our final question segment, we have a $100 donation from James P. and also a $50 donation from Bob P. And they brought us up to $4,415 on the fundraiser. A huge shout out to James and Bob for helping us to get there, and everyone else as well has donated in the meantime. But with that, we're jumping into our first question here, and actually it's not a question, it's the Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight, we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J., Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, and Her Royal Fluffiness, who said Morse for tonight says, from the LSA Signal Corps, that Belarus is doing what they do best, which is looking stupid and looking at very often. And LLT LSA and go Ukraine.
And that is the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all on getting that correct for the 914th day of the war. Pretty impressive stuff, I gotta say. Pretty neat, and I gotta say, thank you so much once again to y'all for once again making sure to get that dead on the nail once again. It really does blow me away. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, Bobo Vasquez said, I got at the point we were mimicking someone else's talking. We do that a lot with everyone. I'm glad that you enjoy it and you get a laugh out of it, because there are some really, really sensitive people out there when we do stuff like that, because we've done that on everyone. We've done that on "it's great, it's fantastic, you can't get any better." And we also do it on the other guy who's currently, the one that's what they call the sitting person who, what happened, Jack? What's going on? And then we'll do it on the, I hit a bear and I threw it in Central Park. And we do it on everyone. And I mean, people never, sometimes some people never click that in their head that we make fun of everyone equally, because we want to make it a little fair, and also there's a lot to be made fun of. And then some people hear the person they like get made fun of, and they're like, "Oh, how dare you? You commie," or something like that. And it's like, wait a minute, it's like we make fun of everyone. It's like, what the hell? It's like we're not commies. I hate commies. I just don't get it. But I'm glad to hear that you do enjoy it, and I'm glad to hear that you do get a laugh out of it, because we love to know people actually do get a kick out of the impressions and all that stuff. Because Matthew, you know how it is, Matthew. I mean, every once in a while, it just comes back around. Oh God, Matthew, the worms.
Oh man, honestly, here's my thing. If anyone ever mocked the way I speak with somewhat of a southern accent to my voice and stuff like that, I would just be like, look, I'm gonna just roll it off my shoulders and stuff like that. It's just an impersonation. If you try to impersonate someone's voice and someone gets all butthurt about it, basically they're like, "Oh my God, they impersonated me. They're making fun of me." It's like you must be very insecure, for that to really mean something to you. It's just it's literally just someone making a joke or a sort of a humorous comment or something. I don't ever say anything that, intentionally to hurt people's feelings, unless you're Hot Dog Man. That's a different story, because he's just straight up evil. But everybody else, I'm just joking around. I just lighthearted, just joking. So
yeah.
I see some folks, they always get very sensitive about it. They think, "Oh, you're making fun of the guy and his speech thing." No, I'm not. Not trying to make fun of the guy and his speech thing. Everybody's got a problem here and there, and not trying to make fun of him for it. But it's just an impersonation for comedy.
Yeah, it's just for giggles. It's just for fun. That's all. That's what we're about here. Is having fun. I mean, what do some people not get that? Do some people not understand? I mean, just because someone says something and makes fun of someone doesn't mean you have to dislike him. Now, we do dislike Hot Dog Man. We'll be honest about that, because we would be lying if I said I like the guy. I clearly don't. But everyone else, I mean, I got no qualms with them. I mean, they kind of seem like interesting people. I'm sure. I am sure that it is fun to hang out with him, because he will dump a bear off as a present. And I bet you it'd be really fun to hang out with this guy, because God knows what would happen. And it would be fun to hang out with this guy, because he doesn't even know what the hell's going on. That's really a reoccurring theme amongst the three of them nowadays, isn't it? No one really knows what the hell's going on, and no one knows what they're doing, really.
Basically, I would say so.
Yeah.
But real quick, I don't mean to get off the impersonations real quick, but I saw something from Andy L that I wanted to address on the live chat. He said he thinks that the exchange last night between Israel and also between Hezbollah and Lebanon, he thinks that was a negotiated exchange. And honestly, Andy, I would have to somewhat agree with you on that. Because the fact that they're exchanging messages right now, saying that they're open to mediate the thing and they really want to de-escalate the whole situation, that goes entirely contrary to what's being said in the public. Israel's saying last night, we're going to glass them, it's over. And then Hezbollah's out there saying, we're going to bring down like the whole situation on top of Israel's head and they're going to be finished. But yet in the background, they're like, can we please like de-escalate? Thank you. It's like, it sounds like to me like they're talking a lot behind the scenes and they're doing this all for like a big theater, like a public show at this point. And that's what happened last time as well. The same thing. So I'm not really sure what to think about the Middle East at this point. There's so many like shadow players in the background playing in the Middle East. It's really hard to tell if the real public image is the real situation, but that's just me. But Enforcer, what do you think?
Shadow Wizard Money Gang, we love casting spells. I would say beyond the whole shadow thing Matthew was talking about there, it is really hard to see what people's actual intentions are in the Middle East because there are a lot of everyone wants to actually get each other in the Middle East. Like everyone has it out for each other, but at the same time they're really scared what would happen if they actually acted out on their ambitions. And so everyone ends up just kind of doing things to save face, but it continues on the tensions and the conflict amongst everyone. So I would say that in my opinion, I would agree with Andy L. It does seem like it was some sort of a negotiated agreement that was made last night about how that would go, because the Israeli response was pretty proportionate to what the Hezbollah forces were going to do, and it looks as though no one really wanted that to kick off too much, or there may have been some powers at play in the background that were trying to make sure that it didn't turn into too much, possibly. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our first live chat question of the final question segment, we have one from Kuchulian343. They said, I've just been hearing about the Belarus situation, and do you think it's possible that Putin threatened Lukashenko with a tea party if he didn't join the war?
I have a feeling that instead of threatening him with coercion, he probably tried to persuade him by saying something along the lines of, hey, if you get involved in the war, we'll give you this after the war. Probably some sort of an equal exchange. Because if Lukashenko was threatened with death or something to put himself in danger, he probably wouldn't have gone along with what the Russians wanted him to do, because generally that kind of stuff makes people do the opposite of what you want. Generally, you have to persuade them, kind of like the stick and carrot thing, and usually the carrot works a little bit better than the stick sometimes, especially in these kinds of situations. So I would have to say that if the Belarusians really do end up invading, then it probably is the case that it's probably the case that he was persuading him and giving him some sort of an offer. Also, I saw someone say that Matthew's impression of this person is better than mine. I agree. Like that's not offending me at all. His is way better than mine. Like mine is like a half baked attempt compared to Matthew's. Matthew's is flawless. So no, you're not saying
so much, Tony Stankard, for the kind words. I appreciate the words because, of course, the worms, they're getting in my brain and they're controlling my motor functions. And thank you.
It's really good, actually. It's like weird how good it is, but yeah, it's not Tony Stinker.
I hope I'm not on the verge of like getting something like that happening to me. That would be ironic, wouldn't it? I sit here and make a joke about it, and then later I'm talking like,
man, that would be pretty rough. that would be pretty rough.
That would be.
But still, I hope that does address that well. Like, I don't take offense to that at all. If I took offense to that, I would have to be crazy. Matthew's version is better than mine by far. Like, I don't even think it's not even like up for question. Of course it's better. Some voices I do better, but that one Matthew is the champ of. I don't think anyone on the internet beats him in doing that one right now. I haven't heard a better one yet. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so the next one here goes to WYKKYD, who said, wouldn't Poland, Estonia, and Latvia get involved if Belarus attacked Ukraine?
It's kind of a bit of a question whether they would or wouldn't. We don't really know. The Belarusians have nuclear weapons from what we understand. And I have seen some people, let me really quickly address this before I even get into answering this question. Some people are saying that we're massively overplaying what is going on here. I would disagree, because the fact that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine put out this statement today, Dmitry Kubala put out this statement this one right here that you're seeing on the live UA map, for them to be putting out such a serious and strong-worded statement like this is not downplaying the situation at all. This is reading it the exact same way the Ukrainians are taking it at this moment. I want to put that out there because for some, I don't know what it is. I have no idea, because it still happens here and there. Like with tonight, we sit here and we read the words that are on screen, where they go, according to intelligence, the armed forces of Belarus, under the guise of exercises, are concentrating personnel, equipment, tanks, artillery, anti-aircraft missiles, and air defense systems in the Gomel region near the borders of Ukraine. And then they say they want these forces to withdraw. And that they warn that if they invade Ukraine in the event of a violation of the border, they will use all measures necessary to destroy the invading force. The Ukrainians are literally taking it as an official statement that this is going to be an invasion. That's what they're taking it as. I mean, if you don't like the sound that Belarus is going to invade Ukraine, don't blame me for telling you that's what's going on. Why don't you go and go piss on Dmitry Kubla, since he's the one who put out the statement? Like, if you don't believe it, like, that's fine, but at this point you'd be delusional, because we're literally getting this straight from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is Dmitry Kubla. You know, this would be the guy who would know that there would be an invasion coming around the corner, because he's one of the most senior people in the Ukrainian government. So, you know, like, that's something that I've been seeing in the chat a little bit tonight, because the title, Belarus to invade Ukraine, the Ukrainians believe the Belarusians are to invade Ukraine. That's what the statement says. I mean, it's not like I'm misinterpreting the wordage here. It says it black and white, clear as crystal. So I have no idea what else I'm supposed to do. What am I supposed to be? One of those stuck-up assholes that cover the stuff and go, I don't think it's anything. Like, it's something. Like, the Ukrainian government thinks it's something. Like, I'm not going to sit here and read the Ukrainian government statement and go, oh, you know, like, well, I guess the Ukrainian government is stupid and they don't know what they're talking about. They've only gone through this once. And you know, got invaded when it happened, when the Russians did it. I'm sure they have no clue what they're talking about. This is nothing. You know, like, that would be stupid to say on my end. I'm just reporting the news. So if you don't like the news, that's tough. You can go live in delusional land and go back to wherever that is, you know, because there's a lot of them out there these days. But this channel reports news. If it's in black and white, if it's in clear text, this is what we work off of. You know, it's a government statement. What else can I do about it? But moving on from that and into the actual question. I would say that the Polish and the Baltic states, I don't really know if they get involved, because they have said a lot in the past, but we do know that the United States generally does not want to escalate the situation in any region around the world at this point. Even if it goes to the element of appeasement, if necessary, they will do that to avoid any further escalation. So that has led us with a really big question of whether the Polish would act out on their beliefs or what they have said, or would the United States hold them back, or would other members of NATO hold them back? And we're not exactly sure. And so that's kind of the wild card. Because if it was up to the Polish and the Baltic states, they probably would end up getting involved and end up joining the conflict. But we have to remember that there are larger powers at play that are probably going to be threatening them behind the scenes. That if they do these things, there may be reprisals that they may not like, such as the blocking of further arms deliveries and arms contracts to those countries, which could be a big deal. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so real quick, we got some breaking news coming out right now. We got word 30 minutes ago that a massive missile and drone attack is about to start in Ukraine, according to live Ukraine Maps reporting. It looks like about 55 Shahed drones are flying over Ukraine, 11 Tu-95Ms took off, and also some MiG-31Ks are airborne, apparently, along with a submarine and 2 frigates and a small missile boat with calibers went out of the base to the Black Sea. So it looks like they are gearing up for an attack on Ukraine. But while this is happening, Ukraine is also striking back as well. And right now we're seeing, oh my God, Enforcer, go to the Twitter and look at the top post. Ukraine just sent a drone into Russia's largest high-rise building in Saratov, Russia. You gotta like show this video right now. Like, this is crazy.
So let's take a look. Oh, damn!
Holy crap!
Okay, so let's take a look at this. So this is in Saratov. Let me make sure to show y'all where Saratov is on the map. It's a little bit deeper in Russia, if I remember correctly. Should be somewhere around here. Here we go. There it is. So this is Saratov, and it appears that they hit a high-rise in the town.
Блять, это
Damn.
пиздец, сука!
Dang.
Это пиздец, 37-этажку прилетел, блять!
That's a doozy.
Huh. Well, let's see what the damage looks like. Dang. That was actually pretty significant.
Also, can we tell what drone that was, by the way? Was that definitely a Ukrainian drone or not? Because that seems a little bit odd to me for some reason.
Apparently, according to Noel reports, it was a UJ-26 Bulber. Like, you know, Bulber Kurva. So we'll go pull up the UJ-26. Yep, this is a Ukrainian drone. I mean, the shape is identical. I can show a picture of it here. So this is a Bulber, which is the little drone that hit the building. And you see the wing shape, very distinct. And so we'll go back to the impact video right here. And you see that front little wing, the larger flat wing near the rear. So this is a Beaver or a Bulber. So this does appear to be a Ukrainian drone that hit the building dead on.
I will say this real quick as well, because this is preliminary. Just happened, looks like maybe 17 minutes ago. Take this with a grain of salt, because to me, this seems a little bit uncharacteristic to see Ukraine striking a civilian high-rise building. That would be a little bit hard for me to believe, honestly. That appears to be, like you're saying, a Ukrainian drone, but then again, it could be maybe a false flag or maybe some attempt by the Russians to make it staged like the Ukrainians did it, because I have a hard time believing this one, to be honest with you, but I'm not sure.
We'll have to wait and see what we can get out of it, but let me see here really quickly if I can try and find this high-rise, because it was close to the Volga River, and it was somewhere in the town of Saratov, closer to downtown. So let me see if I can find a building that would be similar in shape to that one. And I think I'm getting a little too far down. We're getting back into commie block land, so it's somewhere around here. So, is that it? No. Let's see here. We have to find the exact building. And this is always a little tough.
I'm seeing some posts on here saying that it was heading for Ingalls Air Base, and it apparently maybe fell short or something, but to me it looked like that drone was actively steering toward the high rise. I'm not sure if anyone else noticed that, but it looked like it was correcting to go right into it. So, you know, maybe it fell short, maybe it was pre-programmed and simply ran into the building or something, not really sure, but it definitely hit right smack dab in the middle of it.
Okay, so here's our building right here. This is the building that was hit. What the hell is this? Huh. We got a little bit of a Rasputin going on out here. Okay. But anyways, it's right on the Volga River. It's right near the R-236, the major bridge crossing the Volga. This is the building right here. Apparently called Volga Sky, or is it this building? Nope, that's the bridge apparently. Let's go to Volga Sky. So yes, this is the building right here. So let me make sure. Yep, there it is. That's the building. And this is what the rooms looked like inside of the building. We actually had some pictures up here at the top. So this is kind of like a rough... That's actually horrendous looking.
Jeez, that's bad.
Yeah, that's pretty freaking rough. And this passes for, like, high style in Russia. And this is a hotel, apparently. So we'll see if we can find out some more information about the Volga Sky. So, a lot of reviews. It's closed. It opens at 9, so it's going to be opening in a few hours. Let's see. Let's see here.
Damn, this one's definitely catching the news, like, with this hit right here, because this is somewhat unusual to see, like, such a large, like, new modern building like that being hit, that it appears to me like to be a civilian building, quite clearly. This one's being caught up by the news quite a bit, so I'll be curious to see what statements come out from Ukraine about this. I have a feeling we might be seeing a statement come out that was not a Ukrainian drone, and I would tend to believe that, but we'll just have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. It is an apartment building, actually. It's a high-rise apartment building here in Saratov, from what I can tell. It looks like a lot of people are actually complaining that the elevators don't work and there's no access to hot water sometimes in the building. But beyond that, it is interesting to see that a drone impacted the building dead on. We'll have to wait and see what this turns into in the future, because it seems like a lot of people are claiming it's a Ukrainian drone that impacted the building. We may hear later on that this is verified to be a Ukrainian drone, or we may find out it was not a Ukrainian drone. We're not entirely sure at the moment, but still pretty wild to see at a minimum. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least with what was happening live on air right there. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this question right here goes to Nickelodeon Surname, who says, using Belarus's own logic, they say that 100,000 NATO troops suddenly needed to do military exercises along their border, the Belarus border. Would that be fine? Because, I mean, it's just exercises.
Yeah, that actually technically would be fine. They would still freak out, though, because every single time that happens, that could be a build-up to a military offensive into their country or into their region, but we could end up conducting a major military exercise near to Belarus's borders to make them feel a little bit of the pressure and the heat and maybe back off because they'd be scared of us creating a full-scale offensive out of that quote-unquote war game. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Eugene Minton, who said, if Belarus attacked Ukraine to assist Putin, would any NATO nation bordering Belarus invade it in retaliation or to end that action?
Can you reread that one again really quickly?
Eugene said, if Belarus attacked Ukraine to assist Putin, would any NATO nation bordering Belarus invade it in retaliation or to end the action?
We're not entirely sure. Once again, I can't really get into the minds of the leaders of Poland and the Baltic states to really know for certain. That could happen, but we're not entirely sure. Going off of their statements, they probably would, but you never know. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Caden, who says, do you think that the Belarusian government would collapse if it failed to invade Ukraine?
No, I don't think so. I think the Belarusian government is unstable, but it's not entirely off the rails. So, in my honest opinion, I would have to say I don't think so. I don't think that the government would collapse at any time or any chance. Also, Matthew, I don't know if you're seeing this, but we got a very interesting very interesting thing going on that popped up in the Twitter DMs. You might want to look at that one because it seems as though something may be going on that you and me have not seen. But just go over there and take an eye on that one on this next question because I can't read the whole thing yet, but it doesn't look that good. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one here, we have one from Doug, who says, why doesn't the Ukrainians move south along the border and cut off troops and supplies in the Donbass?
That's a good question. You would think that they would try and move along the border, but the problem is that if we're talking about down in the Donbass, it's heavily defended. The Russians are currently conducting an offensive there right now. And for the Ukrainians to be able to sweep around from Kursk through Belgrade and all the way down around the Donbass, they would pretty much have to relocate most of their army into Russia, pretty much opening up this entire area for the Russians to do whatever they want at that point. And it wouldn't really be that successful or that good of an operation in the long run. They're kind of limited by the availability of manpower on the kind of actions that they can take. So we'll be, waiting to see how that goes, at least as much as we can. But I would have to say that that offensive operation is largely not possible. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one here is going to go to Damien Balou, who said, I heard a lot of former French military saying that it would be better for Ukraine's army to extend from east and west in Kursk rather than going further. And what do you think about this?
I would have to say, can you reread that one again? Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted here in the background.
Let's see here. Damien said, I heard a lot of former French military saying that it would be better for Ukraine army to extend from east and west in Kursk rather than going further. And what do you think about this?
That's generally what we've been assuming, is that they'll start to expand towards the western flank and further east, maybe even meeting up with the Ukrainians that are currently holding Kolotolovka at Vyazevo, currently inside of Belgrade. That's what we're assuming at the moment, because going any deeper may not achieve any positive results. And not only that, their flanks may be jeopardized because there would be a large area where the Russians could conduct counterattacks and try and cut off the Ukrainian force. So going wide instead of going deep is probably the better answer in this situation. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one right here is going to go to Joe Emily, who said, can Ukraine use any U.S. weapons against Belarus?
No. From what we know, they can't use any weapons against Belarus because they don't have authorization. And generally, if you don't have authorization explicitly stated, you can't really use them against Belarus. So no American weapons have been approved for use against Belarus at this time. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one right here is going to go to, let's see, Shadow Jim, who said, did anything ever happen to those troops in Moldova? I heard about in the beginning of the war, or were they planned out or planed out?
They're just still sitting there. Nothing's really happened to them. They haven't been destroyed. They haven't grown in number. They haven't gotten more powerful. They're just sitting there and just still kind of just doing nothing, really. Transnistria is really a nothing burger. Really, they're never going to do anything because they don't have a way to resupply or reinforce those units from anywhere else, especially considering that it's inside of what would be an enemy country for Russia. And not only that, Ukraine, which is also an enemy country, surrounds Moldova on 3 sides. And then on the other border, there's Romania, which is a NATO-aligned country, meaning there would be no way for the Russians to really send in any kind of help or support to those Transnistrian forces at any time if it was to really kick off. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a very good question from Susan Cook, who said, is the Belarusian army as well trained as the Russian army?
I would assume no. It's entirely a conscript force inside of Belarus. They've never modernized or attempted to reform their army at all. And while the Russian army is pretty bad off, they did conduct a military reform starting in 2012 after they ended up running into some pretty significant problems in the Second Chechen War and also during the Georgian War as well. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to, let's see here, it's going to go to AF Kaplan, who said Belarus has given most of their best equipment to Russia, and just how viable is an invasion of Ukraine by Belarus, considering this?
It may be or may not be viable, considering that the strategic reserves they probably have to end up fighting are mostly infantry units. They're not even motorized from what we can tell. They probably wouldn't do that bad. But we don't really know for certain. And on top of that, we don't know how much of the Belarusian equipment actually went to Russia. We saw some choice examples here and there that certainly did show up in Russian hands, but we don't know if that it was only 20%, 30%, 60%, 70%. We're not entirely sure. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we're about to be moving on to the next one. But really quickly, I'm going to have to make a comment about this, about something interesting I'm starting to see in the chat. I don't know what it is, but I'm seeing some particular people saying some things that are very unsavory. Now, we do make jokes here and there that are a little bit on the edgy line, if you want to say that, but I'm not wanting this chat to devolve into complete degeneracy, and I'm starting to see some people are starting to really push that a great deal, and I got to tell y'all that we're going to have to push that back against that. I'm not a big fan of people putting weird stuff in the chat. I've been seeing it a little bit tonight. I've been wondering if that's ever going to curb itself or if that's just a small one-off thing. I've been seeing it for about an hour now. So I've just got to put this out there. We're not going to be allowing that kind of stuff. So I would generally ask everyone to keep it nice and PG. Now, you know, of course, we will make every once in a while a joke on air that has an innuendo behind it here and there occasionally, but we're not going to go into just straight degeneracy like I'm starting to see some people, a very small amount, doing in the live chat. So just putting that out there because I'm seeing this a good bit, and we're going to have to start putting a foot down on that. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Anonymous, who said, have there been any statements by the U.S. or Poland previously indicating how they would respond if Belarus decided to invade?
Well, and this is with Poland?
Has there been any statements by the U.S. or Poland?
We haven't really heard any statements by the U.S. or Poland yet. This situation is just happening today, and so there hasn't really been enough time for the U.S. or Poland to be able to formulate and give out a statement pertaining to a possible Belarusian invasion of Ukraine. So we have no statements at this moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one right here is going to go to, let's see here. I got a lot of the same question over and over tonight, I'll be honest with you. I'm trying to go through and find a new one. Also, by the way, huge shout out to AJ throwing a $150 donation to the fundraiser just a moment ago. Hey! And brought us up to $4,639 raised, which is tremendous to see. And huge shout out to you, AJ, for that support of the fundraiser. We also have one here from Ed, Irish Ed that is. He said, before Ukraine moved into Russia, there was a strange call from the Russian defense minister to our defense minister in the U.S. And do you think it was about that?
I don't think so. With the Belarusian invasion, I would doubt it. It was most likely about the Kursk invasion instead and what was going on with that. And the U.S. Secretary of Defense probably stated that they didn't even know it was going to happen, because that's what we found out a good bit later, is that no one was actually informed or told about it. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one is going to go to, let's see here, Damian Baloo. He said, if Belarus invades Ukraine and there's no one who comes to help them, do you think that will put Zelenskyy to call on a full mobilization, since there's none of that at this time?
Actually, really, to be honest, the full mobilization has been going on in Ukraine since day one. A lot of people have been under the misconception that they have not been. Martial law was declared within the first week of the war, and since then, no males in between the ages of 18 and 47 have been allowed to leave the country, period. If any of them have left, they are leaving illegally, from what we understand. There may be some few exceptions where they can. Most of them leave illegally. In between that age bracket. And so the Ukrainian government has been trying to deal with that a great deal. And also, from what we've heard, even from the Ukrainian government, sometimes they have a very tough time going out and finding new conscripts, because they are drafting a large amount of conscripts at this time to build up the armed forces and keep it going. And they're finding it a little bit difficult. So from what I understand, they really can declare a full mobilization, because they've pretty much been in a full mobilization since week one of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I understand and the knowledge that we have at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this question goes to David Long, who says, do you think that Ukraine should do a preemptive strike on Belarus?
A preemptive strike on Belarus? I would say not, because they may be overreacting at that point. Maybe the Belarusians really are just trying to posture, and they have no intention of invading Ukraine. And if you preemptively strike them, then they have to proceed with some sort of an invasion, and then you've kind of brought it upon yourself, and you didn't allow all available options to exhaust themselves before you were left with the last case scenario of an actual invasion happening. So I would say I would generally be against that, because maybe the Belarusians will not invade, and we really want to wait and see if that is the case or not before we act. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in this situation. That's kind of a different answer on a case-to-case basis, but we'll have to wait and see on this particular one. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question here goes to Bug C, who says, why is there no info about F-16s in action yet, and are they still on the ground?
We've heard about F-16s flying around. We still have not heard anything about them being in action. I don't know why. Maybe they just want to hold them back. I'm not entirely sure. So, to be honest with you, I'd have to declare ignorance on that, because we know so little about the F-16s, the Ukrainian service at this point. We can't really say a lot about them either, because we don't know much about them on our end. And so with that, I hope that does address that best I can. We are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Paramecium 13, who said, did you hear that Hezbollah hit an Israeli chicken coop?
No, I didn't. Did you hear about that, Matthew?
I did. I think that was like the only thing they were able to hit last night was a chicken coop. I think there was maybe some chicken casualties, but that was the extent of the damage.
Man, that just amounts to chicken shit.
Oh,
man. But beyond that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, and this one goes to Pixel Lord, who says, do you think that Ukraine might hire contractors from the West, like Blackwater?
Well, we've heard that entertained in the past a little bit. It really depends on whether America would allow that group to be able to operate inside of Ukraine. But at the moment, we haven't really heard that much against it, that much pushback. So technically, the Ukrainians could hire mercenaries from the West, like Blackwater, to be able to go over to Ukraine and fight for them. It's just that we've never really seen that so far. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this one right here, I'm looking for it. Let's see. This one is going to go to, I'm scrolling through the chat here, trying to find a new live chat. Yes, we did. So let me do some scouring here for a second and see if I can spot one. Let's see here. Let's see. Honey. Let's see here. I'll be honest with you, I'm not seeing one right off the bat. Oh, here's one from Michael Thomas. He said, thoughts on a coup d'etat in Russia against Pupler?
I'm kind of a doubter on that, because we've thought that something would happen along those lines for the entire war, and nothing really has. I'm not one to run my head into the same brick wall over and over and over when it's not really the case anymore, and I don't really think a coup against Putin is highly likely anymore. Yes, the government's in a fragile situation, but I don't think anyone has the balls yet to be able to stand up to Putin and actually try and conduct a coup d'etat, at least in my opinion. And so with that, I hope that does address that at least the best I can. Hopefully, there's a great last question to have right here, but we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer, not those viewers, that viewer is David Tablet, who said, what are the odds that Iran would send troops to fight for Russia?
I would have to say, reread that one again one more time, Matty. Reread that one. Reread the line.
What are the odds that Iran would send troops to fight for Russia?
Highly unlikely. In my opinion, that's about as likely as North Korea actually sending a usable combat brigade or a combined arms brigade of a sort into Ukraine. I would say that's about as unlikely, because both of those countries are pretty bad off and really don't have a way to sustain or support their forces beyond their own borders, or at least at an incredibly long distance like they would be inside of Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. I've got to say a huge thanks to all of y'all, because if it was not for folks like y'all, it wouldn't be possible to run streams like these. It wouldn't be able to have the kind of impact that we have as well through these Sunday night fundraisers. We've been able to fundraise tonight alone $4,700 approximately, exactly $4,669 nice dollars, to the fundraiser to help out. It is absolutely incredible and wonderful to know that folks like y'all continue to have massive hearts of gold and continue to support and help out the folks in Ukraine, the folks that we cover the news on almost every single day. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching. Thank you all for once again helping out that fundraiser. And with that, we are now going to be rounding out this stream tonight. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die, and we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night and take care.
And with that, good night, folks. Thank you all for another great fundraiser stream. Of course, $4,669 raised. Nice. And we will see you all on Tuesday night. And if there's enough news to cover, we'll see you midday tomorrow as well for the short war summary. But once again, thank you all for another great stream. Slava Ukraine. Heroam Slava. Be sure to join us again on Tuesday and get some rest and good night.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Army shall